Good morning, it's 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, the first Thursday of the new year, so Mystery Hour, all being well, will be upon us at 12, with the added bonus, of course, that many of you will have enjoyed playing the board game over the Christmas period, possibly even found it under your tree on Christmas morning, which I don't know if it adds a new dimension, actually, to the radio programme, but hey-ho. There's also an interesting story that I'm minded to talk about in the second hour, about school children no longer having to do any writing. They can type everything. You know how much I like stories about change, especially the ones where at first glance you sort of go, well, that's absolutely bloody ridiculous. How could and then at second glance you go, yeah, okay. So I wonder, will we miss anything if as seems likely, handwriting finds itself becoming extinct in the coming years? But we begin in the deep end, the deepest of the deep end. We begin with the unfolding situation in Gaza. And a conversation that I've known we were going to have now for some time, but I really didn't want to have it. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to find some comfort or confidence in the idea that the Israeli government is not embarked upon the de facto destruction of the entire Gaza Strip, with little concern about how many people, well, no concern at all about how many people would be displaced during that process, and little evident concern about how many people will die. It's extraordinary when you think about it, that the death toll now is well past the 20,000 mark, with just under half of those people being children. Half of those people being children, and yet we are not giving it, we have not given it a fraction of the coverage that we did to the carnage in Ukraine or the carnage in Syria. And when I say we, I mean the British media, which at one extreme today, on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, quite extraordinarily, they consider it to be more newsworthy that the former Prime Minister, the disgraced former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has complained about the Metropolitan Police inviting people passing through this country with any alleged evidence or evidence of alleged war crimes in Gaza to talk to them. Remember, there were British citizens caught up in the catastrophe in Gaza. We spoke to one of them yesterday, a dual citizenship scientist up in Manchester. And yet Boris Johnson and the Daily Telegraph combined to complain about an investigation into alleged war crimes that would involve presumably a dozen officers. While over 20,000 human beings are dead, nearly half of them children. So there's an almost unbelievable imbalance there, an almost unbelievable imbalance. And the reluctance to talk about it comes from the bleakness of the conclusion to which one is led. That conclusion there, that the policy, the intent is to destroy the entire territory and quite possibly render it uninhabitable for generations to come. Two things have happened in the last 24 hours that make it, I think, impossible to avoid that conclusion. The first is a warning from Western leaders against explicit Israeli plans to resettle hundreds of thousands of Gazans in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So one report has suggested that there have been secret talks to send displaced people there. Some Israeli officials, including far-right, and that phrase isn't even controversial, members of government, far-right ministers, have been publicly advocating for the resettlement of Gazans. I don't know what definition of ethnic cleansing you work under or the relevant institutions here work under, but if you take an entire people from their homes and relocate them to a far-off land, a far-off territory, then that's pretty close, I would have thought, to most people's definition of ethnic cleansing. The West has expressed concern about these supposed plans. The rhetoric, they say, is inflammatory and irresponsible. The African nation is 2,500 miles from Gaza, and the way that the story has been picked up on the Times of Israel's Hebrew site, which is called Zman Yisrael, suggests that senior sources believe that the talks have unfolded. They call it the voluntary migration of Gazans to other countries. But how voluntary would it be if the alternative is a hellscape? A hellscape. 8 minutes after 10 is the time. The second thing that happened on LBC last night, and I don't know if you heard it. It was heartbreaking, actually, because anyone who has feared from, I think it was about a week to 10 days, wasn't it, into the assault. The first week, the case for Israel's necessity, let alone right, to respond robustly, whatever that means, to the terror attack of October the 7th was watertight. Nobody could argue they must, turn the other cheek, as the New Testament would teach. Nobody could argue that. And yet after about a week to 10 days, the sense that something truly horrific had been unleashed was becoming, I think, unavoidable. But you could still argue the toss. You could still cling to the hope that there would be some sort of proportionality attached. The idea that they wanted, or that the plan was to raise the entire territory to the ground, regardless of the consequences in terms of displacements and death, was too horrible to contemplate. So we sort of tied ourselves in semantic knots for a while, condemning it but not calling for a ceasefire in the case of both governments and the Labour Party, although America and the United Kingdom ended up in a tiny international minority on that front. Again, evidence perhaps that we are being shown this bombardment, we're being shown this catastrophic undertaking through a very distorted lens in the United Kingdom and the United States, because the argument, I think, has become absolutely uncontestable. The Israeli government wants to raze Gaza to the ground. And I say that because I think that the ambassador to the United Kingdom, the Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom, essentially told Ian Dale, my colleague Ian Dale, that last night. I don't know if you caught this programme. But she, it's Zippy Hotovelli, speaking to Ian Dale last night, as far as I can tell, and I don't know if I'm using the wrong dictionary, she kind of said it out loud.
One of the things we realised that every school, every mosque, every second house has an access to tunnel. So this is, and of course ammunition.
But that's an argument for destroying the whole of Gaza, every single building in it.
So do you have another solution how to destroy the underground tunnel city, that this is the place where the terrorists hide, where they have all their ammunition, and this is the rockets that are still fired on Israeli cities? You know how Israel started its new year? We didn't have fireworks. We had rockets instead of fireworks.
And I think you have to point out, to the best of my knowledge, very few or no casualties as a consequence of those attacks, while the death toll of Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip smashed through the 20,000 barrier. I'm going to play that to you again, because I think that is the Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom essentially saying, we are, and there's no evidence that every second house, every school, every hospital has access to tunnels. But even if it did, could you imagine the British government going into Belfast, the British army going into Belfast and blowing up every house on the grounds that the neighbours might have been Republican terrorists, or that there might have been IRA men hiding in the cellar? So they're going to blow up every house, every hospital, every school, destroy the entire Catholic neighbourhoods of Northern Ireland because of terror attacks on the UK mainland or in Ireland? No, of course you couldn't. So listen to this again, and then we'll talk about what we think we've heard.
One of the things we realised that every school, every mosque, every second house has an access to tunnel. So this is, and of course ammunition.
But that's an argument for destroying the whole of Gaza, every single building in it.
So do you have another solution how to destroy the underground tunnel city, that this is the place where the terrorists hide, where they have all their ammunition, and this is the rockets that are still fired on Israeli cities? You know how Israel started its new year? We didn't have fireworks. We had rockets instead of fireworks.
So I'm pretty sure the argument until quite recently was that the bombardment was necessary in order to rescue the hostages and to destroy Hamas. But of course, anywhere a terrorist could be hiding, a hostage could be held. So not only is she essentially explicitly stating the ambition to destroy the entire territory, to render the entire territory uninhabitable, she is perhaps accidentally completely abandoning any pretense that anybody cares a jot about rescuing hostages. And this is the point, I think, at which the debate, if it is a debate, is almost over. Unless you want to have a conversation about whether or not you support the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. I can't see that there's any other question to be asked anymore. And I stress again, this is a conversation about Israeli government policy. It doesn't matter what religion people are or what geographical origins they have. This is about Israeli government policy. And it seems to me now, thanks to the ambassador, the government-appointed ambassador to the United Kingdom, the stated aim now is to raise the entire territory to the ground. And from where I'm sitting, I don't think anyone's going to be able to stop them. And that's extraordinary, really, when you think about it. I don't think anybody is going to be able to stop them. Do you? 0345 6060 973. And of course, if it's not ethnic cleansing, then give me a call and tell me what it is. Reports that there are plans to move thousands of people thousands of miles to the Democratic Republic of Congo, calling it voluntary, despite the fact that the alternative would be presumably to live in a hole or to live in a tent. And we have a former British Prime Minister complaining about the Metropolitan Police dedicating a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of resources to the question of whether or not war crimes have already been committed. And we have both major parties, the leader of the Labour Party and the leader of the Conservative Party, both continuing to fall short of calling for a ceasefire. So I articulated a lot and often and carefully in the past my deep understanding of the existential threat under which Jewish people live all around the world, not just in Israel. And I make no apology for reminding you of that and for returning to that territory. Whenever we address this issue, it is, in my opinion, a historically unique condition to have been target of Holocaust within shared memory. The generational trauma that delivers is absolutely inconceivable if you have not lived through it. But it cannot justify what is now happening in Gaza. It simply cannot. And that, I think, is why the words from the ambassador, Zippy Hotovely, were so chilling on Ian Dale's programme last night. Because the people who are actually prepared to say out loud what everybody now knows is happening sound absolutely horrendous. What else can we do but blow up the entire territory, render the entire land uninhabitable? I wonder whether I can ask the question of whether or not you support this. But I'm not sure I can, because I'm not sure I could bear to talk to you. The absolute destruction of an entire territory, the displacement of millions of people, the killing of thousands, the death toll of children alone should be enough to focus the mind of any person. And yet here we are. Here we are listening to the ambassador, the Israeli ambassador in London, justifying what has to be ethnic cleansing, doesn't it? What else could we call it? Well, I'll play it to you one more time and then I'll open up the phone lines.
One of the things we realised that every school, every mosque, every second house has an access to tunnel. So this is, and of course ammunition.
But that's an argument for destroying the whole of Gaza, every single building in it.
So do you have another solution how to destroy the underground tunnel city, that this is the place where the terrorists hide, where they have all their ammunition, and this is the rockets that are still fired on Israeli cities? You know how Israel started its new year? We didn't have fireworks. We had rockets instead of fireworks.
So there it is. We're listening to a woman justify the destruction of every school, every hospital, every home, every building in the Gaza Strip. And people who were cautiously supportive of Israel's retaliation, Israel's response to the October 7th terror attack, clung desperately to the notion that it would be proportionate, that it would be designed to rescue hostages, and that it would be carefully calibrated to focus upon Hamas members, that there wouldn't be, if you like, collective punishment or unjustifiable civilian casualties. And here we are. 21 minutes after 10 is the time. I suppose there's some room to examine whether or not my reading of those words from the Israeli ambassador is correct when Ian Dale says to her, but that would involve destroying the whole of Gaza. And she says, well, what else could you do? Is she saying, yes, that's the plan? I think she is. And I don't like the semantic debates. I don't think the word genocide is appropriate, but my goodness me, the word ethnic cleansing, or the words ethnic cleansing, certainly seem to be, don't they? I'll read you this from Sue in Ilford, because she's been listening to the same radio programme that you have. You are an absolutely disgusting anti-Semitic animal. You know exactly what you're doing. You're opening the floodgates for every left-wing Labour Muslim to call in and slate Jews. I wish you were Jewish, then you'd know exactly how that feels. You and that moron Owen Jones are exactly the same. Vile. So for Sue's benefit, and perhaps the benefit of anybody else, this is what we're talking about.
One of the things we realised that every school, every mosque, every second house has an access to tunnel. So this is, and of course ammunition.
But that's an argument for destroying the whole of Gaza, every single building in it.
So do you have another solution how to destroy the underground tunnel city, that this is the place where the terrorists hide, where they have all their ammunition, and this is the rockets that are still fired on Israeli cities? You know how Israel started its new year? We didn't have fireworks. We had rockets instead of fireworks.
So there it is. It may well be that I am an absolutely disgusting anti-Semitic animal. I personally would dispute that fairly robustly. But what I won't let you do, Sue, is stop me from asking these questions that you find so unbearably uncomfortable by hitting me over the head with these vile accusations. And the question is pretty simple. Is the Israeli ambassador there essentially admitting and justifying the complete destruction of the Gaza Strip? If you want to ring me and tell me, yes, she is, and I'm perfectly comfortable with that, however many children die, then by all means do so. But don't kid yourself that kind of offensive language is going to stop me asking these questions. It just makes me even more determined. But have a lovely day. 23 minutes after 10 is the time. Tafsir is in Newham. Tafsir, what would you like to say?
Hi, good day to you. I just would like to mention the thing is, we are allowing this to happen. As a country, we allowed Israel's existence. That is true. But when it comes to accountability, we take our hands off.
What's we? So the American and the UK governments have failed to call for a ceasefire. But even if they did, Netanyahu specifically and this administration, what could be done?
Why we are
Hang on, you can't answer a question if I haven't finished asking it. What could, for example, Rishi Sunak do that would stop the carnage tomorrow?
Put sanction on them.
What sort of sanctions?
Not giving them any aids, not giving them any new artilleries. Put a sanction on, as we put sanction on Russia.
But
why we are not doing that on Israel?
Okay, and you think that the conflict in Ukraine has stopped as a consequence of sanctions on Russia, do you?
But it hasn't stopped. But Russia.
So the question is, what could Rishi Sunak do to stop it?
Say it that okay, there is this make them accountable for what they have done.
I think you're being overly ambitious. I think what you want and what I think I want is just for them to say this cannot continue. This cannot continue. The justification, even
someone needs to say this. Someone needs to say this, because the atrocities the Israeli spokesperson is showing all over the world, not only to UK, in US and everywhere, that this will happen, and we will not stop till every single one dies. This is the outcome they are they are expecting. At the first, why there are so many tunnels in Hamas? Because if you are oppressing people, a full nation they can't have water, they can have electricity. How you want them to respond? How?
Well, I'm afraid I disagree with you. I disagree with you quite violently there. I don't believe there's ever any justification for the sort of scenes that we saw on October the 7th. I think that Hamas is a despicable, bloodthirsty death cult dedicated to the complete destruction of the modern state of Israel. But that doesn't provide a rationale for the modern state of Israel to undertake the complete destruction of the Gaza Strip and of the essentially of the Palestinian people. I find it possible to hold those two thoughts in my head at the same time. I appreciate that lots and lots of people don't. Just a vote for a ceasefire at the United Nations, says Tina, would be a start. And don't forget that Keir Starmer has fought shy of that position as well, for reasons that I don't fully understand, but we will continue to examine. 10:26 is the time. I wonder if anybody can use or listen to the words there from the Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom on Ian Dale's LBC programme last night and tell me that it's not an explicit, never mind implicit, acknowledgement that the plan is to wipe out every building in that territory. The weirdest thing for me, it was the moment, and I know this will annoy you or some people, and it makes me sound a bit silly perhaps and a bit naive, but when the defense, what it is, I think, if I were Sue in Ilford, who called me, what did she call me again? A disgusting anti-Semitic animal. If I were a supporter of Israel and I'd allowed my position to turn me into someone like Sue, I probably wouldn't be able to acknowledge that everything they give me to defend what I'm defending, they then take away. So we have to do this in order to rescue the hostages. They've taken that away from you. We're doing it in a safe way because we've told everybody to move out of the areas that are being bombed. Yeah, but then they told everybody in the areas that they'd moved to that they were going to be bombed as well. Oh, we've dropped leaflets from the sky. So you can't really blame us for the people that then die because they haven't read the leaflets and moved along. Well, we heard yesterday from a man who's just got back from the Gaza Strip about how traumatizing the leaflets themselves can be. And then, well, it's going to be, I imagine the next stage of the conversation will be, it's going to be a voluntary removal of people. And how voluntary is it if the alternative is to live in a hole, to live in a tent? So that's the bit that I think I find hardest to articulate is that notion that the reasons the Israeli government has given its defenders and supporters to continue their support keep being taken away from you, which is how I suppose you end up in a position where all you can do is spit bile at people telling the truth and asking important and honest questions. And that important and honest question today is, can anybody really argue that the Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom live on LBC last night didn't tell Ian Dale that the plan is to destroy the entire territory and to render it uninhabitable, to blow up every hospital, to blow up every school, to destroy every home, to displace every single person? And if you think that sounds apocalyptic, then you haven't been paying attention. Because if that is the project, and I can't at the moment conceive of any compelling argument against the conclusion that that is the plan, it's already very, very, very well underway. The number of displacements into the millions, I think. And still that figure, the number of dead children, which will grow exponentially once the rubble is removed, once the looming famines and diseases have done their worst, the number of dead children will be off the charts. And I don't know, will the Israeli ambassador still be sitting there saying, we needed to do it in order to destroy some not largely, but some tunnels that may or may not have contained some bad people? Probably. 10:30. Thomas Watts has the headlines. It is 33 minutes after 10. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Paul's in Coventry, says, I have a close friend in the IDF, James, who is risking her life for her country, not for a far-right government. It is my firm opinion that you are not anti-Semitic. I don't think that's up for debate, really, despite Sue and Ilford's hysterics. What the Israeli government is committing is mass slaughter and unjustifiable. It is plain wrong. And the argument is, what else can they do? And I just don't accept the parameters of that question. It's first of all, it's not our job to come up with an alternative. It's our job to point out that this is unacceptable. This is simply unacceptable. You know, it's a bit like saying, what else can Hamas do except launch terror attacks on Israeli people? No one comes out. Very few people on this side of the world come out after that happened and say, well, what else can they do? If they do, they'd be shut down immediately. So why is it acceptable to say, well, what choice have Israel got but to kill 10,000 children? What else can they do? And I'm afraid historically the argument about the rockets, and it must be horrible to see them flying overhead, but it's a little bit like comparing chalk to cheese. The damage done by those rockets fired from Gaza, thanks largely to the Israeli defence system, the Iron Dome, is negligible. Certainly negligible when compared to what's happening in Gaza now. So that doesn't really hold water either. But as I said, if you've taken away all of the other arguments, you have to cling to whatever is left. Rachel's in Dudley. Rachel, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning, James.
Hi.
First of all, I'm very nervous. First time caller.
It's only me. It's only me. It's not exactly a controversial subject, Rachel. We'll be fine.
And I'm going to... the lady that I spoke to, actually, that
Yes.
was really brilliant because I was not coherent. I was spluttering. There were so many points I want to make. So I'm going to try and be coherent and cohesive and on topic. I'm Jewish.
Okay.
I tend to be motivated in anything that happens in the world by economic strategy and what is best for the countries and for the people and what is fair. And sometimes there isn't a rosy option, so what is the best option you can have? But I do not stick up just for anything because I'm Jewish, for example.
Yes.
I've been called anti-Semitic. But what is happening is so obviously unfair and wrong. And I want to thank you, first of all, for putting things across, having the courage to do that, and being the only person I've heard who has... I mean, other people are starting to comment.
To be fair, Ian pushed back against the ambassador last night and said, but that means that you are calling for the destruction of every home and school and hospital.
And I was glad, because he'd been sort of on the other side.
Well, let's not critique my colleagues, but I'm just pointing out I'm doing a bit of modesty. It doesn't come naturally to me, Rachel, but I'm definitely not the only one.
No, but you are the only one that is being so outspoken, if I can say. And you have constantly had the courage to actually say, well, hang on, what's going on here?
What's really happening?
What's really happening? What's the end game? What's the solution? What is it that they want? You know, it was 30 years ago when I actually went to Gaza, and I was traveling with a rucksack, and I went and I witnessed a lot of things that were very, very anti-Palestinian by the Israelis that were there.
Right.
I won't go into that because we want to keep on topic, but there's a lot I could say about that.
Let me steer you to that question,
sorry.
Then, which is listening to what Zippy Hotovelli said last night.
Oh, yes.
Can you find any hope that it wasn't an essential endorsement of the idea that she believes Israel has the right to blow up every building in Gaza?
Well, that's clearly what she thinks. And how can she say that? I mean, I heard her with Ian Dale yesterday, and I heard what he said. And all she did was talk about, well, everybody's got tunnels, so, it's okay. I'm paraphrasing, and probably I'm being inaccurate here. I don't want to be disingenuous, but I've listened to her a number of times, and every time I've listened to her, I can hardly believe what I'm hearing. The whole... It's streets. What Ian Dale said is right. Streets, you know, I don't see that this thing about civilian not trying to destroy civilian targets. Sorry, if I get my words mixed up, I apologise. I'm not very good at this.
You're doing great.
But
I mean, in a way, you articulate by not articulating. There is a sort of sense of incoherent anger or heartbreak, isn't there, attached to this?
And it defies any kind of credibility or logic, because if we're going to employ some kind of logic here, and she's saying what happened to what Hamas did was dreadful, it was dreadful. I'm not going to dispute that. But what they're doing is I don't want to say 10 times worse, but it's involving far more casualties.
I mean, depending on what metrics you use, and that's why the question that we were asking even 6-7 weeks ago was how much will be too much, and no one wanted to answer it, Rachel. No, and I understand why. How much will be too much, and the subtext of that failure to answer that question was that nothing will be too much, and I think that's where the ambassador went last night. There is no too much. There is no response that would be too much. And some people believe that. Thank you, Rachel. Kevin's been in touch. He says, you suggested that the objective of the IDF is to destroy some tunnels that may contain weapons. I didn't. I said that may contain bad people. Some of the tunnels will, Kevin. Some of the tunnels won't. The ambassador's rationale for blowing up every building in Gaza is the number of tunnels that do. But Kevin's not happy. He says, this is an insult. There are hundreds of miles of tunnels housing hundreds of terrorists and arms. Your statement is a disgrace. So we're talking about 10,000 dead children and you're worried about my words, which you also misheard and misrepresented. You've got to give your head a wobble at some point, mate. You've got to. My statement is a disgrace, but the Israeli ambassador essentially justifying the destruction of every hospital, school and home in Gaza. You're cool with that, pal? Just think about it for a minute, for a hot minute. Asim's in Bradford. Asim, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Good morning. Thanks for having me. So prior to Zippy Hotiveli saying what she said last night, she also said a similar thing to some extent. I think it was with Ian again prior to Christmas, where she said she didn't essentially believe in the two-state solution. So I think she planted the seed for what she was going to do, and essentially they build up the rhetoric for the essential ethnic cleansing of Gaza. And I suspect they'll probably potentially do the same in the West Bank. I was so upset, essentially. I was thinking, what else can we do in this country? We can put pressure on politicians, but they seem somewhat scared to say anything against the Israeli government. So I started a petition, which is on change.org, and that was prior to Christmas. So we've had nearly 60,000 signatories, essentially wanted to expel the Israeli ambassador. And is that something we can do to show the Israeli government that we are not in agreement with the destruction of Gaza and the murder and killing of...
Quite presumptuous, isn't it? Because it doesn't seem to me that Rishi Sunak has taken the stand, and to a lesser extent, Keir Starmer.
Yeah, no.
I mean, your petition notwithstanding, the UK government's position still looks quite supportive to me.
It does, and that is what's so horrifying, I think, to the majority of the population in this country. Now, you'll ask me about statistics. We know right at the start of this that there was the majority of the UK population agreed to have a ceasefire. So I think it was like 3/4 or 80%, something like that. And I suspect if you did the same now, that would be even higher. But yet, the people in government and people in opposition are scared to even say the words, this is unacceptable. And it's so disheartening and upsetting for myself, for the population, for healthcare professionals, for journalists who've been killed in Gaza, nearly 100 now, I think.
Yes.
And I want to bring up one other point about the media. We get, as you mentioned in your introduction, James, we get a somewhat kind of polished version. We have speakers and spokespeople like Elon Levy. We have Mark Ragev coming on. The rest of the world gets an unfiltered version of what's happening in Gaza, James. It is horrendous. You can find it on channels like Al Jazeera, for example.
Well, I'm interested, and I do. I mean, what I don't understand, and what I can't get my head around, I don't know what the solution is to the commentary, if you like, the balance in commentary, because you can't. No one's going to call for senior members of Hamas to be treated with the same regard as senior members of the Israeli government, but no one really speaks for the Palestinian civilian, do they? But you're referring, I think, more to film, more to footage, more to actual proper pictures of the destruction being broadcast in the same way that we may have seen pictures of what was happening in Syria or what has happened in Ukraine or what has happened in Yemen. We don't seem to be seeing the pictures of what has been happening in Gaza in this country in quite the same way.
Yes, absolutely, in this country, but the rest of the world is seeing it unfiltered.
Which explains the United Nations votes, perhaps, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You know, UK abstained in this latest vote, the US, and, you know, I'm really worrying about what the future holds, whether it's with regards.
What do you think the future does hold? Because I'm going to say this. I think I've already said it, but I don't think it is going to stop. I think Gaza is going to be razed to the ground, and I think that the Palestinian people are going to be relocated. I think that they're going to be cleansed.
The thing is, the resilience of the Palestinian people for the last 75 years is unheard of, and I can almost guarantee that you will not beat that resilience, no matter how much you bomb civilians.
If a significant part of the population is in the Democratic Republic of Congo, I mean, what does resilience mean then?
Yeah, I think that the solution here has to be the people who are funding the Israeli government, i.e. Americans, for them to say, enough is enough. Let's get back to talking, and let's, absolutely, the Israelis have the right to defend themselves, but the way to do it is not what they've done. Absolutely decimating.
And is there any mileage in the question of what should they have done instead then? Because I don't personally think there is, but, I'm scrupulously fair, so I will articulate that question. What would you do differently? The answer is just kill fewer people. Or I think the question that we stumbled into quite early on in the conflict was go after Hamas in Palestine, or in Gaza, I beg your pardon, go after Hamas in Gaza with the same care for civilian life that you would show if you were going after terrorists in Israel.
Absolutely. And I think, was it last night or the day before, where they managed to kill Hamas, a political leader of the political in Lebanon. I think they'd had a targeted attack on a building. And I think
yes, like a sort of surgical strike. And a lot of people drew that comparison, actually, Asim. A lot of people wondered why similar levels of technological nous couldn't have been deployed in the pursuit of fighters in Gaza, terrorists in Gaza. Richard Millett has tweeted, another day, another anti-Israel blood libel from Mr. James O.B. So again, you've been listening to the same 40-odd minutes of radio, and I presume you haven't heard any anti-Israel blood libels from me. I'm not sure Richard Millett knows what that phrase even means. But he goes on, quoting 20,000 Palestinians dead in Gaza and half of them children. Obviously, Israel has killed no Hamas, even though the IDF has lost nearly 200 soldiers. Not quite sure what point he's making, but I suppose it's important to acknowledge that people like that are listening to the same radio show that you're listening to and arriving at that conclusion. I'll retweet that one so you can have a look at it for yourself. It's 10:47. It's 10:50. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Can you get one of those people on, James? Says James. Or do they not call in? They don't call in. This chap Richard Millett on Twitter and Sue in Ilford are calling me an anti-Semitic animal. You can't ring in now because you would have to say, I support the complete destruction of Gaza. That's where the Israeli ambassador has left you. So instead, because you're not, and I think this speaks to your credit, actually, both of you and anyone else sending in similar messages, it's to your credit that you're not prepared to say that out loud, even though the ambassador is, because there is still some part of you that understands how awful that is, how reprehensible that is. But instead, you just want to close the conversation down. You want to stop people like me asking the question and replaying the clip and pointing out the unavoidable reality of what is being described. And you try to shut down that conversation by calling me anti-Semitic. I know it must be incredibly frustrating that I just understand it so well. But I'm not going to apologise for that. It's taken me years to get my head around these issues properly. And that's why I repeat again and again the absolute essential understanding of the generational trauma, the existential threat under which Jewish people live. You can't get to the point where I understand where you're coming from when you call me anti-Semitic, unless you also understand the very, very real and I think historically unique situation of Jewish persecution. The history of pogrom, the history of Holocaust takes you to a place where anything is justifiable in perceived self-defense. But it doesn't mean you're right. It just means I understand you. 10:52 is the time. Have a listen to this as well. This is also from last night's appearance on LBC by the Israeli ambassador, Zippy Hotovely. I'll let you make your own conclusions.
Well, I'm afraid that the result is that Hamas was the one who destroyed the future of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And it's a shame. You cannot understand that this terror organization basically destroyed the Gaza Strip.
So there it is. I mean, again, speaking, one presumes, with the full support of Benjamin Netanyahu, but essentially admitting that they're going to destroy the entire Gaza Strip, albeit that they will say that Hamas did it somehow, or that it was Hamas's fault, or it was Hamas's responsibility. The pretense that this would be a proportional and targeted response against Hamas terrorists has completely disappeared. And yet the people who argued this will be a proportionate response and targeted response against Hamas terrorists, not least because we need to rescue the hostages, you're still defending what's happening, despite the fact that it's now the thing that you insisted wasn't happening when you started defending it. This, I think, is even more chilling, perhaps, than the words about homes, hospitals and schools.
One of the things we realized that every school, every mosque, every second house has an access to tunnel. So this is, and of course ammunition.
But that's an argument for destroying the whole of Gaza, every single building in it.
So do you have another solution how to destroy the underground tunnel city, that this is the place where the terrorists hide, where they have all their ammunition, and this is the rockets?
I think the second bit, the bit about well, you listen to it yourself, the second clip.
Well, I'm afraid that the result is that Hamas was the one who destroyed the future of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And it's a shame. You cannot understand that this terror organization basically destroyed the Gaza Strip.
So they're going to destroy the Gaza Strip. And they're going to say that it was Hamas's fault, which is, intellectually comprehensible. You can get your head around that. We can understand it. But when it began, everybody who supported everything that Israel did said that that wasn't going to happen. And now the ambassador is saying it is. So how can you still be supportive of it? Joe's in Birmingham. Joe, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah, so firstly, I just want to say over the last year and a half, I've spent quite a few months with an NGO in the West Bank, and I've got a lot of personal connections there. But because of the nature of this conversation, I'm going to try and sort of set that aside, which is hard. But if I do stray into kind of personal feelings territory, please do set me back on track. Yeah. But of course, I cannot justify or understand what the ambassador says. And more importantly, when you couple her words with the military campaign, if you can even call it that, being waged on the ground in Gaza, I cannot see how it adds up to anything but ethnic cleansing. And I think the tragic thing is Israel has never been less safe now. Israel's never been less safe than it is now. When you look at any counterinsurgency or counterterrorism campaign, as fairly fundamental sort of pillars of approach that need to be taken, and mass bombing civilian areas is the antithesis of any of those campaigns. And I've seen with my own eyes the rise in support for Hamas in the West Bank, an area which is not a Hamas stronghold by any means. There's not really that much support, but it's never been more popular than it is now. And I've seen that in response to settler violence, and I've seen that in response to IDF violence as well. And the fundamental thing is, in response to violence, you have more violence. It's like violence breeds violence, and the only way out now, it's such a small window, but the only way out is a ceasefire and then a peace built on mutual respect and shared freedoms. And I cannot see how the government of Israel can look themselves in the mirror and believe that what they're doing is in the best interest of not just the people.
Well, you heard the ambassador speaking. I don't struggle to believe that they believe that.
No, well,
that's what I mean.
I can't believe they believe it, and that so just leaves you the only thing is
safety for someone like Zippy Hotovely is the removal of the threat and the erection of ever safer barriers between wherever the threat coalesces. I was trying to think of an example. I don't have the history, unfortunately, but I'm trying to think of an example of an almost successful attempt to root out a terror organisation or a threat of the nature of Hamas. And I can't think of one because I don't know enough about, for example, the Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka and areas where governments have declared complete military victory over resistance movements or terrorists or whatever people prefer to call them. But they clearly think, and Netanyahu said this as a younger man to Max Hastings, they do clearly think that there is some sort of resolution that just involves complete victory as opposed to the compromise that you describe. And that's the other thing that Zippy Hotovely has said. That was what the previous caller, Asim, reminded us of when she essentially talked about the two-state solution no longer being viable or desirable.
Yeah, and I will never understand what it is like to be Jewish and to have experienced the generational trauma, but it doesn't make the world a safer place. And you push, let's say they do push out all the Gazans into the Sinai, and you've got 2.2 million Gazans in refugee camps in the Sinai. They will become hotbeds of radicalization that will push people straight into the arms of, at best, Hamas, and at worst, far more radical organizations. They will have access to arms coming in more freely. I cannot get my head around it. I've done a lot of reading, and I have a background in kind of military history and things. And from an intelligence point of view, and from a military strategy point of view, it does not make sense. And when I say that, it's very hard for me because, from an emotional point of view, every day I struggle to even look at my phone. But I cannot understand it, and that I spend every day just going round and round in my head, thinking, why are they doing this? Yeah,
well, it's interesting that you put it that way, because as you speak, Chana's been in touch, and they write, it's very sad, but as Hamas have said, they do it again and again. Don't you understand it's them or us? Which, again, is something that you cling to if you're trying to sustain support for this carnage. You cling to the idea that it will succeed. But as you've just pointed out, you're going to have 2 million displaced people living in tents, and somehow the antipathy towards the people who they consider to be responsible for that is going to disappear. It's that. I mean, it just, that's from the very beginning for me. That's been the hardest thing to understand. The idea that doing this will actually take away or destroy the resentments and the grievances that lead to radicalisation. It will do the opposite. Surely it will do the opposite.
Yeah, and you look back at any conflict in history. You look at our own campaigns in Afghanistan or Iraq in particular, and the lack of security in Iraq after the invasion, and the lack of reconstruction, and it was utter failure, and that bred radicalization, that bred sectarian violence, and from that we had ISIS. It's textbook stuff.
Doesn't seem to lead anywhere else, does it? But possibly some people can offer up a different analysis. Thank you, Joe. And I just, for the record, I'm perfectly comfortable with you bringing personal experience and emotion into conversations like this. I think it's impossible not to sometimes, but that was very helpful. It is 11 o'clock. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Chris has been in touch. He says, I think you must have dictated this message to your device, Chris, because it's come out here as this is Cinta New Word Latin Radio. And I thought, what on earth is he talking about? But obviously, I think the word you said was scintillating, and that's what your technology has translated it into. You have continually posed the question in many different ways, what is the end game? And now we've got the answer in black and white. OMG, you write. Now the real discussion can start. Except, of course, it can't, because if you try to start the real discussion, you have people queuing up to call you terrible, terrible things in the hope of shutting you down. The vain hope, of course, in my case, but not in many other people's. 4 minutes after 11 is the time. Vinny's been in touch. He says, morning, James. I fully appreciate this doesn't rise to the importance of this incredibly well-conducted conversation about Gaza that you've just been having, but please do give a shout-out to Luke Littler. What an incredible effort from someone so young. I will take an opportunity for a little bit of distraction. It was a magnificent game of darts last night. It truly was. At the early start, I just thought maybe he's going to bottle it, or that's a terrible way of putting it. But the scrappy first set suggested that Humphreys might run away with it, and then, my goodness me, what a game of darts! The amazing thing about Luke Littler, apart from his darts, is his maths. I've never seen a player do the maths like he does it, because he'll throw a dart. I tell you what, I think Keith Deller had a tricky job last night. Keith Deller is usually the spotter that they use at Sky Sports, and the spotter in darts is the fellow who tells the cameraman, tells the director where to point the camera. But because Luke Littler's calculations in his head, he's seeing routes that other darts players don't see. I mean, historically, you go for the triple 20 as often as you can. And if you can't get through to the triple 20 or you feel your throws off, then you go for a triple 19 or a triple 18. But Littler sometimes would just go for the 17 or the 18 or the 19. And you'd think, why is he doing that? And it's because he'd calculated the route to a checkout, as in the number from which you can finish, in a way that other players don't see. It's an odd thing to say about a 16-year-old school leaver who's just won hundreds of thousands of pounds throwing arrows at a board. But the maths was magnificent as well. And then he would do it. You know, he'd check out from 3 figures, and then the other fellow would come back, and Luke Humphreys would come back and do the same. It was an extraordinary game of darts. And I mean, so much so that I did almost find myself. Do you ever do that where you think, well, I can't believe all these Johnny-come-latelys, all these people jumping on the bandwagon? The number of people in the media who suddenly got interested in darts because a 16-year-old lad had got to the final was extraordinary. And it's great. It was just me being silly, going, well, they never talk about the darts normally. But of course you talk. It's a great story. And the interview he gave at the end, he said something really incredible that speaks of him having quite an old head on his 16-year-old shoulders. And I don't just mean that physiologically. As I said to you earlier in the week, if the fellow was a refugee, the Daily Mail would be carbon dating his teeth. He looks about 31, I would say, give or take a year or two. But he said, the thing he said at the end was that that he might not be in another final for 5 to 10 years. And you sort of thought, I'll give yourself a break. And then you thought, oh, hang on a minute. In 10 years, he'll be 26. To still be one of the youngest finalists ever if he gets into a second final 10 years after the first. So, yes, Vinny, and thank you. It was a wonderful example of, I don't know what it was a wonderful example of. Sport transcending barriers, sport doing things that nothing else can do. It's 8 minutes after 11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Jill's in Brighton. Here's one. O'Brien is a sanctimonious pig attempting to incite more anti-Semitism in the UK. He will have blood on his hands for this. He is without doubt a closeted anti-Semite and should be kicked out of LBC as a very dangerous influencer. That's from Jill in Brighton. So Jill is responding to the question I ask off the back of this clip. And the question is, does it sound to you as if the Israeli ambassador is justifying the destruction of every home, school and hospital in the Gaza Strip?
One of the things we realised that every school, every mosque, every second house has an access to tunnel. So this is, and of course ammunition.
But that's an argument for destroying the whole of Gaza, every single building in it.
So do you have another solution how to destroy
that's me being a sanctimonious pig attempting to incite more anti-Semitism in the UK by asking you what you think the Israeli ambassador to the UK is saying, and I'd ask you the same question about this.
Well, I'm afraid that the result is that Hamas was the one who destroyed the future of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And it's a shame. You cannot understand that this terror organization basically destroyed the Gaza Strip.
So, question of, are they going to destroy the Gaza Strip appears to have been answered. But it's me that's the problem for Jill in Brighton. And, of course, Sue in Ilford and Richard, whatever his name was, over on Richard Millett over on Twitter. And I have to read these out because I have to show you why so many people in my profession do balk at the notion of asking these really simple and straightforward questions. Because these are horrible accusations. It's not a question of having thick skin. It's a question of having intellectual confidence to know that it's nonsense and to understand why you have to reach for these accusations, because the alternative is to answer the questions that I'm asking. But of course you are answering them. It's not my fault. I'm not responsible for what you see in the mirror that I hold up, Jill. Alex is in Hendon. Alex, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. I'm a first-time caller, so a little nervous, but I'll try and put it across as eloquently as possible. First of all, I want to start by condemning all of the name-calling I am Jewish. I'm a strong Zionist, but name calling is foul and just
unless it's accurate. I'm a big fan of name calling when it's accurate, Alex. I think we can all agree on that.
Calling someone a pig, I'm not sure if that's particularly accurate or should be present. I wanted to say really that Israel is a democracy. Currently, there is a national unity government which has parties from across the political spectrum in Israel. And Tzipi Hotovely was an ambassador who has a, shall we say, a right-wing history and past on political positions. Do I think that she represents the current government of Israel, given that it is a national unity government? No.
You can't do this, Alex. I mean, it is literally, the appointment literally involves being the Israeli government's representative in London. That's the actual job description. You can't, however much you might balk at what she said, you can't ring in and say, well, I don't think she represents the government that appointed her to represent the government that appointed her. You just can't. You must see that. So
what I believe, and it's a bit of a theory, is that she is preparing for a political campaign. But we can't move on from the first thing that you said yet, I'm afraid. You can't. You cannot say, because the only way you can cling to the notion that this isn't as repellent as it is by persuading yourself that she doesn't speak for the government. But if the government's ambassador doesn't speak for the government, then who the hell does, Alex? Okay, so the previous ambassador to the UK from Israel was Mark Regev, and he's now, I believe, a senior spokesman for the Israeli state. And I think that he does a much better service to the Israeli government in terms of representing the beliefs and the...
Because he doesn't say out loud the things that Tzipi Hotovely says out loud.
No, I don't believe it's that he's not saying it. I think that he has a much greater understanding. I think that Tzipi Hotovely does a disservice to a lot of the Jewish and Israeli people in the UK.
She's the ambassador,
because her rhetoric... I know. And
she's the ambassador. We've got far-right members of the government. You'll know more about this than I do, but you've got Itamar Ben-Gvir, you've got Bezalel Smotrich. They are members of the government, and they go further than Tzipi Hotovely does. So you can't say they don't speak for the government. You just can't. They're in it. That's like saying Jeremy Hunt doesn't speak for the government of the United Kingdom.
Well, I can say that she doesn't represent all of the figures within the government, because we have a national unity government now.
Okay, we're not going to make any progress here. Let's look at her words then, and let's look at the question of whether she is. I mean, she is, isn't she? She is essentially justifying the destruction of the whole of Gaza.
She has used inflammatory rhetoric.
Well, tell me what the rhetoric means. What does the rhetoric mean?
I believe it means that she'll take very strong action, or she believes that the state of Israel should take very strong actions.
Listen to this clip. Listen to this clip, and then tell me what you think she is saying.
Okay.
Well, I'm afraid that the result is that Hamas was the one who destroyed the future of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, and it's a shame. You cannot understand that this terror organization basically destroyed the Gaza Strip.
So just focus on the word destroyed, or the words destroyed the Gaza Strip. What do you think she's saying?
So the Gaza Strip, if you look pre-2005, was not in the state that it is.
People are listening. We're talking about post-October 7th. What is she saying?
Okay, but with regards to the words that she just said about the Palestinians destroyed the Gaza Strip. I wouldn't say the Palestinians.
No, but the words we're focusing on are destroyed the Gaza Strip. What is she saying?
Okay, so I believe she's saying, and I'm not her, so I can't really speak for exactly what she said.
Yes,
but what
I
believe,
we know what the word destroyed means. We know what the words Gaza Strip means. We put them together, and what do we get?
Okay, so what I believe she's saying, James, is that in 2005, or 2006, both years, when the Gaza Strip was handed over to Palestinian Authority control. So that not the Palestinian Authority that we know today, but Hamas.
Just so you know, I'm not going to interrupt you again, but I'm going to play it again when you finish speaking, so we can compare what she's actually said with what you're saying now.
Okay, no problems. So Hamas took over control of the Gaza Strip, and they have been governing it, if you can call that governance, for the last 17 years or so. And Gaza beforehand was not in the state that it is today. There was civil life. There were Jews, Arabs, Muslims, Christians, all living within the Gaza Strip. And whilst it was, in a sense, I'm sure, a melting pot of different cultures and different groups within the society, it wasn't in the position that it is in today. As soon as Hamas,
when you say the position it is in today, unless I'm misunderstanding you, you're not talking about the destruction of huge swathes of the territory. You're talking about governance.
I'll come to that.
Well, you won't, because we're going to run out of time, and I am going to play the clip again. But you think that she's talking about the poor governance that Hamas has brought in prior to the...
describe it more strongly than poor governments using international aid.
So then what about this bit then?
Well, I'm afraid that the result is that Hamas was the one who destroyed the future of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, and it's a shame. You cannot understand that this...
And this one?
One of the things we realized that every school, every mosque, every second house has an access to tunnel. So this is, and of course ammunition.
But that's an argument for destroying the whole of Gaza, every single building in it.
So do you have
I think
another
Ian's
solution?
done a better job than me there. So Ian is saying this is an argument for destroying every building in Gaza, and you're saying no, it isn't.
No. That's not what I'm saying. Quite possibly that's what she...
Why do you have to say quite possibly? What else could she possibly be saying? Why the reluctance, Alex? Just genuinely, in your own words, why are you so reluctant to say what is so obvious?
Because as someone who has visited Israel, who's been to Kfar Aza, who's even been to places like Ramallah and spoken to Fatah officials, I'd like to have an idea that I have a well-rounded knowledge of the conflict, of the situation.
So why are you so reluctant to say what is so obvious? She couldn't have been any clearer. She didn't even deny it. Ian Dale says that would involve the complete destruction of Gaza, and she essentially goes, "Yep." Why do you struggle to just describe what everyone else is listening to?
Well, look, I think she is highly inflammatory and in some cases extreme individual. And possibly that is what she's saying.
But why the possibly? Why can't you just say she's clearly calling, or at least justifying the putative destruction of the entire territory? Because she just is, mate.
Well, I wouldn't say the entire territory. I think that
every school, every hospital, every home. What would that leave?
If that is indeed what she's calling for,
well, let's listen to it again. Then let's listen to that first clip again.
Every school, every mosque, every second house has an access to tunnel. So this is, and of course ammunition.
But that's an argument for destroying the whole of Gaza.
So what else could she possibly be saying?
I believe she is saying something very extreme, and
she's the ambassador. She's the ambassador for the Israeli government, a government that contains Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, who've gone even further than her.
Yeah, that's very true. But the good thing about Israel is it is a democracy, and I'd like to think, and protests in Israel will perhaps demonstrate this, is that at the next election we won't be seeing more of Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, because they again do a disservice to peace in the Middle East and to Jews and Israelis in the diaspora as well, because every time that something inflammatory like this is said, it is Jews and Israelis on the street that actually feel the pinch, because there's been a remarkable increase in anti-Semitism.
I join you in that hope, but obviously I have to remind you began by saying that for Zippy Hotovely, she thinks that this is an effective way of launching a political career back in Israel, which
she believes so.
Yes, which sucks some of the optimism out of our shared hope that this kind of politics will be on the wane in Israel at the next election, doesn't it?
Well, at the same time, you look at Reform UK over here, and they believe that they're going to have a strong chance of doing well in this next election.
Well, there's a twist I wasn't expecting, Alex.
So everyone really believes that they can do very well. You wouldn't really launch. Well,
they say there's a difference between truly believing and of course saying out loud that you can do very well. But fair play for taking me by surprise at the end there with that parallel. Alex, take care and thank you for your thoughtful contribution. It's 11:20. 23 minutes after 11 is the time. It's not a pleasant conversation, but it's a terribly, terribly important one. And I think that the difficulty, so I was so grateful to Alex for the last contribution, the difficulty of hearing the words of the Israeli ambassador and looking at the actions of the Israeli government, it is impossible not to conclude that the deliberate destruction of the entire Gaza Strip is both underway and policy, for want of a better word. But if you think you can unpick that conclusion, I will bite your proverbial arm off. First, though, Henry Riley is here because Keir Starmer has been giving quite an important speech this morning. I mean, every speech he gives now is sort of perceived as a moment, isn't it, in the package upon which, the platform upon which the next election, whenever it actually happens, will be fought.
Well, totally agree. I think this is particularly significant because by the end of this year we will know if he will be the Prime Minister or not. I think the election seemed pretty distant for some time, whereas now, because it is this year, we've had that confirmed by the Prime Minister, it does feel like there's a realistic possibility, if the polls are to be believed, he will be the Prime Minister by the end of the year. It was almost a carbon copy of last year, James. It was Sir Keir Starmer not wearing a suit, he was just wearing a shirt, sleeves rolled up. He was surrounded last year by big sort of robots. This year it was big aeroplane wings. And he was, very sort of industrial message from Sir Keir Starmer, something he did touch on in the speech as well. And he started off by saying that politics shouldn't be a hobby and that for many people in Westminster, it clearly is. He says the public have a right to be anti-Westminster, said that Labour were up for the fight and an election was long overdue.
There is one thing that we can be sure is coming this year, and I'm ready for it. The thought of millions of people right across our country putting a cross on that ballot paper. It's what we've been waiting for, preparing for, fighting for. A year of choice, a chance to change Britain, a clock that is ticking on this government. Because whether it's in the spring or later in the year, the moment when power is taken out of Tory hands and given, not to me, but to you, that moment is getting closer by the second. This is your year.
The slogan that he repeated on a few occasions was "Let's get Britain's future back." The message is that this is the opportunity to decide Britain's future. He said it rests in your hands and it was time to turn the page on the Tory government.
The power of the vote, the potential for national renewal, the chance finally to turn the page, lift the weight off our shoulders, unite as a country and get our future back.
He also said that he'd hated his job for the last 4 years, hated being in opposition, but speaking directly to voters, he said it would have been worth it if people have held on to that flickering flame in their heart that things can get better.
I will ask the British people to believe in it again. I will say, you're right to be anti-Westminster, right to be angry about what politics has become. But hold on to the flickering hope in your heart that things can be better. Because they can. You can choose it. You can choose the hope of national renewal, the responsibility of service, what politics can and should be. And you can reject the pointless populist gestures, the low-road cynicism that the Tories believe is all you deserve.
Who do we think he's talking about when he talks about hobbies, when he talks about politicians who are in it for the hobbies or the sort of sermonising?
I think he has a few names on his list, but I suspect it's those people who have perhaps risen up the ranks in a way that with no clear direction, I I would suggest.
But not just in the opposition party to him, I think. Perhaps
yes.
Alluding to some people in his own party.
Yes, I think so. Yes. I think so. And I think that was very clear from the message. And actually,
well, not currently in his own party.
Formerly in his party, yeah. He wasn't talking about sort of the front bench. He did also say, forget Project Fear, there is now Project Hope. He urged people to believe in Britain, not Westminster. Now, the criticism, James, is, of course, well, these are great words. He's clearly improved in his oratory skills, Sir Keir Starmer, but where are the policies? Well, number one, Sir Keir Starmer said, the main thing he is keen to get to grips on is cleaning up Westminster.
We need to clean up politics. No more VIP fast lanes, no more kickbacks for colleagues, no more revolving doors between government and the companies they regulate. I will restore standards in public life with a total crackdown on cronyism. I've put expense-cheap politicians in jail before, and I didn't care if they were Labour or Tory. And I grew up working class, so spare me the self-serving excuses. They just won't wash. This ends now. Nobody will be above the law in a Britain that I lead.
I thought that the fellow who was on with Nick this morning, is it Reclaim or Reform?
This is Reform.
I thought that the property heir, I thought he was leading the party of the working class now.
Well, yeah, Sir Keir Starmer disagrees.
Okay, so, well, who knows? Inheriting a fortune versus being the son of a toolmaker, who probably best understands what it's like to be.
He didn't mention being the son of a toolmaker.
No.
In this
it always
speech.
makes me think of the Dusty Springfield song, being the son of a preacher man. I think it would probably work, wouldn't it, if you did it?
No, there's
the only man who could ever please me. Sorry, Henry, carry on.
And I mean, the other sort of, you mentioned earlier, James, about that swipe potentially at people in his own party. As has become sort of a custom with Sir Keir Starmer, he did also say something that has been interpreted as a swipe at none other than Jeremy Corbyn.
Whether you're thinking of voting Labour for the first time, whether you always vote Labour, or whether you've no intention of voting Labour whatsoever, my party will serve you. That's who we are now. A changed party. No longer enthralled to gesture politics. No longer a party of protest. A party of service. Rebuilt, renewed, reconnected to an old partnership, a Labour partnership, that we serve working people as they drive Britain forward.
I thought the strongest part, James, other than cronyism, was another, again, it's not quite policy, but leaning towards what will be key in Labour's campaign and manifesto, was the economy. So Sir Keir Starmer said he'd read in newspapers that the Tories want an election on the economy, and his message was bring it on.
What used to be their strength is now their weakness. The so-called party of business, which now hates business, that boasts about tax cuts while raising taxes higher than at any time since the war. That claim, even now, to be the party of sound finance, but that crashed the economy and made you pay. They have nothing left on this anymore. Their credit rating is 0. And we have turned the tables. We don't just expect an election on the economy. We want an election on the economy. And we're ready for that fight, ready to close the book on the trickle-down nonsense once and for all.
The trickle-down nonsense. Do you know how long it has taken this year for the average FTSE 100 CEO to earn the average income of a UK worker?
4 days?
No, 2.5. It's
is it 2.5?
But I think it's about lunchtime today.
Oh, is it? Oh, goodness.
So that's the money that trickles down, of course, to the rest of us. Did you clip the bit? Sorry, I didn't drift off or anything like that. But the bit about where he talked about populism, did you get that bit?
Yes, I did. I play that. Yes,
I thought you had. So that's really strong, isn't it? That this idea of populism and nationalism needing your full attention you've got to be constantly focusing on this week's common enemy, and that's exhausting. It's a really good point.
Well, and also an interesting point about salting the earth of Britain's future, essentially saying that the Tories are almost trying to sort of poison it, or to give him a particularly difficult task if he does come in to Downing Street. Lastly, James, as well, the other commitment we heard from Sir Keir was that we'd hear more on stronger workers' rights in the weeks and months to come. It's tricky for him because it's like a poker game, this. He has no idea when this election's going to be. Yes. He couldn't really set out his manifesto today, but what is clear, I mean, I was at the speech in Stratford last year, in terms of his oratory, in terms of the way he is presenting himself, there clearly has been a vast improvement, and I think he is beginning to connect with people far more.
Which we also see at PMQs, haven't we? The last 4 PMQs, I think, Natasha Clark, our political editor, was stating every week that it was his best one yet. A bit like Luke Littler until last night in the darts. Every round an improvement on the last one. Henry Riley, great stuff. Many thanks indeed. I like that line. I promise this, a politics which treads a little lighter on all our lives. That's the thing about populism or nationalism. It needs your full attention. It needs you constantly focusing on this week's common enemy, and that's exhausting. Sometimes you see people on Twitter who have been persuaded to spend their whole lives obsessing about immigration or about small boats. And if you're built like me, you, even as you balk at the bilious nature of their output, you do feel enormous sympathy for them, because it must be so emotionally and spiritually draining to be constantly frightened and furious and full of hate. And if Starmer can dial that down, it would be a service to us all, but it will be tricky because the people feeding those bile ducts, they won't be going anywhere. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. It is 11:37. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Mystery Hour on the way in half an hour. A very sad conversation, really, because nobody is challenging the idea that the Israeli army, the Israeli government, armies follow orders. The Israeli government is now embarked upon a plan to destroy the whole of Gaza. The Israeli ambassador to London effectively said so on LBC last night. And one wonders how, I mean, when people were insisting that it was going to be carefully targeted and that the civilian life would be protected and that people would be safe in the areas that they were told to move to be safe, and that the real priority was getting terrorists and rescuing hostages, all of those things used in the early days as a justification for the attacks, for the offensive, they've all gone now. I don't know what that does. I don't think it gives people much pause. I don't think there'll be many people going, I can't believe you lied to me. I was passionately in favour of this military offensive in mid-October, early November, and now I'm passionately opposed to it because you completely lied about what you were going to be doing, and only now are you telling the truth. But there it is. I mean, the comments on Ian's show last night were quite extraordinary in my view. Charmaine's in Epsom. Charmaine, what would you like to say?
Hi, thanks, James. First of all, just want to say thank you for talking about this, because I'm really sorry about the messages you've received, and it completely, like you said, shows why people don't want to talk about it.
Yes. Well, the alternative is to say I'm fully in favour of what's happening, and I mean, we should, I think, derive some comfort from the fact that so few people are prepared to say that out loud for now.
Yeah, I mean, it's been completely heartbreaking what's happened in Gaza over the last 2 or 3 months. And I think what the Israeli ambassador said yesterday is just, she's made many derogatory comments in the past, and, the mask completely slipped. And I think for those of us who've been following the Palestinian struggle for decades now, absolutely knew that what happened on October 7th, horrific as it was, gave the Israeli government carte blanche to do whatever they want and just go and bomb the heck out of the Gaza Strip in the hope to completely obliterate it and occupy it. And I think them occupying the Gaza Strip was absolutely that was their agenda on the first day, and that was why they made such the narrative that they wanted to how they framed October 7th, how the world framed it, like there was nothing else was being spoken about, and that gave them really the ammunition they needed to.
Well, I think you've probably followed things more closely than I do. It was a horrible aligning of planets. There's Netanyahu's. It's not just his electoral situation; it's his legal situation, isn't it? I mean, from his personal and political point of view, everything you say almost felt like a deliverance for him. It almost felt as if it was from his personal and political point of view. It almost felt like
he had nothing to lose. Yes.
Yeah. Well, more than that, it was almost sort of he was given a reprieve in the Last Chance saloon.
Yeah, I mean, he was very unpopular. Obviously, a lot of people in Israel don't support him. That's true, but his popularity has gone up just because they're in a war situation where they think they're going to be, they're up against it. So that he's got that support. But what's been very upsetting is the world support for what Israel is doing. And I just can't think of any other situation where 20,000 people, including half of those children, have been killed, and the British government has not condemned that.
Well, I didn't hear the full program last night, but I people are telling me that the ambassador mentioned Japan as in the context of what was happening in Gaza, and pointed out that Japan, presumably after the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, sort of built itself back up again, which is an extraordinary, if I've understood these texts correctly, it's an extraordinary play, given that, that would be inconceivable in this day and age. The idea that you'd compare yourself to a power that used nuclear bombs to wipe out huge numbers of civilians. But that, of course, was in the context of what we'd have to describe as a conventional war rather than an army going after terrorists. And it's not the world, is it? Because the United Nations votes have been really, really, really weighted in the opposite direction. It's just that the Americans wield so much power at those tables.
Yeah, and the thing is that ambassadors said things like this before in the last few months about how when the Holocaust was, when this World War II was happening, you weren't worried about German civilians, and she's trying to draw these comparisons all the time, and it's just not the same thing. I mean, what happened October 7th wasn't in a vacuum, and that's exactly what the UN Secretary General said. It didn't just all start October 7th. She asks, what can we do? What's the alternative? The alternative was to not occupy the West Bank, not put Gaza under siege, under blockade for the last 15 years. These people, the people who are in Hamas right now, Hamas wasn't around, hasn't been around forever. It's only been around since the, I think, 80s or 90s. And do you think those people who are in Hamas, they have grown up being oppressed? I'm sure when they were children, I mean, they have lived in being occupied by Israeli soldiers with restrictions on their movements. How can we know what they're like? Of course, and what they're doing now, that's creating a whole generation of hatred.
Well, that's the great.
That's why it's so confusing for people to understand.
No, well, I think there's a combination of apathy, misinformation, and bizarrely, Charmaine, I'd say hope. A sort of hope that you can eradicate ideology by displacing people, that you can somehow remove that existential threat to Israel by doing what they're doing now. Some people have to cling to that hope because, well, the alternative is inconceivable for them. You can't say we need to do this for any other reason than the belief that it will somehow work. But quite how it works is beyond me and obviously beyond you as well. It's 11:44. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. No apologies for doing the whole 2 hours on this. You can tell by my voice probably. I really have to sort of gird my loins to wade into these topics. But without the quality of callers that I have, I simply wouldn't do it. I want to make that absolutely clear. And the unpleasant messages that come in really are par for the course. I wouldn't want anyone to see. What I forget, of course, is that if you were at work and you got a message calling you a disgusting anti-Semitic animal, you'd be really freaked out by it. But not to minimise the unpleasantness behind the decision to send in stuff like that. I promise you that I'm fine with it now. I wasn't back in the day, and I think I probably did. Censor myself for fear of being abused like that, but I don't anymore. And it's never water off a duck's back, so to speak. But as long as you're clear about who you answer to, then you can carry on, and you answer to your conscience. 11:48 is the time. I do love that line from Starmer. I promise this, a politics which treads a little lighter on all our lives. That's the thing about populism or nationalism. It needs your full attention. It needs you constantly focusing on this week's common enemy. And that's exhausting. I was thinking about this yesterday. We nearly did an hour. In fact, we may well do it next week or tomorrow on why Rishi Sunak has bet the house on small boats. Because it is exhausting. And it means they're not doing any politics. You know, we've got strikes in London next week on the Underground. Doctors are on strike this week. They're not doing any politics. They're just banging on endlessly about small boats. So it sort of sucks the energy out of politics. Now, it may be that Rishi Sunak is doing that because he doesn't want any attention to be directed towards all of the other things that he's in charge of. But it's such a bizarre thing for a country to do to itself, to obsess about these sort of Faragey fetishes instead of focusing on ways to actually improve our national standing and our individual experiences. It's coming up to 10 to 12. Mystery Hour on the way at 12, of course. Before that, Rob, it says here he's in Zug. Is that a place, Rob? Zug?
It is indeed. It's fantastic. a town in Switzerland.
I want to go to Zug. What would you like to say?
Well, thanks for taking me. First time I've ever actually called in, and having listened to you over the last couple of hours, you're definitely not an anti-Semite.
No.
But the question you're posing to most would be one of democracy, humanity, and it is abhorrent that so many individuals are killed. Fundamentally, Israel is a democratic state, whether you like Bibi or not, or whether you like Zivi or the extreme right wing, and I don't believe they'll be lasting very long. And Bibi has got his worst poll ratings ever, so it's only a matter of time. War hasn't helped him at all. But fundamentally, it is an existential crisis for Israel. They are a country of 9-10 million people. And as a government, you have a responsibility to protect your population. So when you have a terrorist state on your borders whose only goal is to, one, have an Islamic state and to overthrow the state of Israel and to expel all 9 million Jews who live there, I don't think it's 9, I think it's 7 million Jews and 2 million others, you have no choice. You have a moral and legal obligation to your population. And 20,000...
But that would have been true before October the 7th, wouldn't it?
Very true.
Yeah.
And I think Israel is
no one would have argued it before October. No one would have said we have a moral obligation to... I think you're saying to wipe out Gaza.
What I'm saying is they have a moral obligation to protect their citizens.
Yeah, but by doing what, Rob? Let's not be disingenuous. By doing what?
If the consequence of that is that there is the destruction of Gaza, however horrible it is, that is their legal and moral obligation.
Well, I'm grateful for you for saying it out loud, but that's, of course, if we swap the words around, that's what Hamas believe about Israel.
Correct.
So you're putting yourself in exactly the same moral space as them.
I'll tell you why not. Because Israel wasn't throwing rockets onto Gaza. Israel wasn't. Israel is. It was enclosed.
Well, no, I won't, because you've made one point, and I'll make one, and then you can make another one. They're enclosing the Palestinian people in what has been described by the head of the United Nations as the largest open prison in the world.
Which is, all the statistics, Monaco is more densely populated than Gaza.
Yeah, but but if I live in Monaco, I can hop on a plane and go wherever I want in the world.
It wasn't enclosed when there was a democratically elected state.
But it is now.
There.
It is now.
And then
I could go back and point to the period in history when there weren't rockets being fired at Israel. This is a silly conversational gambit.
When Hamas threatened, when Hamas took over and killed the Fatah and the non-Hamas individuals and threatened to kill all those Jews, that Israel doesn't have an obligation to open its borders to any country. No country sovereign has an obligation.
But you're supposed to be telling me why calling for the complete eradication of Gaza is different morally from calling for the complete eradication of Israel.
Because Israel isn't looking to eradicate Gaza because
you just told me it was. You just told me it had a moral obligation to do so.
No, it has a moral obligation to defend itself. It doesn't have a moral obligation to attack.
And the Hamas position is that we need to repel occupation.
But you cannot call a sovereign nation cutting off its borders. But by the way, thousands and thousands of Gazans worked in Israel every day. So you cannot say that the border was closed. Hamas decided...
I can, because it was.
No, its border wasn't. Its border to Egypt was open. Its border to Israel was open.
Yes,
so how
but now it's closed. So it has been closed. But again, I'll just remind you, you're supposed to be telling me why there's a moral difference for you to say Gaza must be eradicated and for a Hamas terrorist to say Israel must be eradicated.
Because one is a democratically elected state looking to defend its people.
But no one's been elected on a mandate to eradicate Gaza.
It's been elected as a mandate to defend its people. Hamas is
but
not,
you're here
Hamas
to defend. You're here to defend the opinion that Gaza should be eradicated, and I'm here to ask you how that makes you any different from someone calling for Israel to be eradicated.
Hamas is not looking to defend its people. Hamas's sole stated goal is the eradication of the Jews and the liberation of its called.
And your sole stated goal in the course of this conversation is the eradication of Gaza in order to defend Israel.
It's not a
what is
goal.
it then?
It's not a unilateral goal.
What is it then?
It's a consequence.
Oh, okay.
Actions have consequences.
Well, exactly, and the Hamas argument would be that Israel's actions have consequences, whether it's the Nakba of 1948 or whether it's the more recent occupation.
Correct. There are consequences.
So you are the
same. No, you cannot put a moral.
Well, give me in a sentence then the big difference between you calling for the eradication of Gaza and a Hamas scumbag calling for the eradication of Israel.
I'm not calling for it. I'm not calling for the eradication.
You called it a moral
of Gaza.
obligation.
As a government, you have a moral obligation.
You called it a moral obligation. Nobody's making that case, not even the government. You're here making that case now, and I have heard people making the case for the eradication of Israel. And to me, sitting in London on the 4th of January 2024, you sound to me exactly the same.
Well, I think your interpretation of what is a democratic elected sovereign state...
Why do you keep saying that? Because there's no democratic mandate for the eradication of Gaza. So why do you keep referring to something utterly meaningless?
It's not meaningless.
Of course it's meaningless. If a government was elected on a platform to eradicate Gaza, you'd have half a point, but it isn't, so you don't.
So the government was elected not to eradicate Gaza, but to defend its people.
But it has a moral obligation to eradicate Gaza.
It was attacked on October the 7th, and in doing so...
Yes, but we both agreed that your point would stand before October the 7th.
So can Israel allow itself to be attacked time and time again? Can any sovereign nation allow itself to be attacked time and time again?
Well, they have done throughout history. The United Kingdom did. It negotiated with the IRA. The peace process in Northern Ireland was a consequence of compromise and conversation. They didn't send the British Army into Ulster or Derry or Belfast and blow up every Catholic house in the territory, did they? So again, because we're going to run out of time.
Have you ever been threatened by rockets?
Well, have you ever had a lollipop? I mean, these are pointless. These are pointless questions. You're here to tell me what the difference is between this scumbag here calling for the eradication of Israel and you calling for the eradication of Gaza. And we've not found anything yet.
Yes, we have.
We haven't, because you keep saying Israel's a sovereign state with a democratically elected government, but that doesn't change the meaning of the words that you use.
Have its stated cause to destroy another country. And Hamas's stated cause...
It doesn't have a stated cause, Rob. It has a moral obligation and the military capability. And that only applies to one side in this argument. Hamas doesn't have the military capability to destroy Israel, but Israel has the military capability to destroy Gaza.
So what should Israelis do?
Well, a two-state solution.
But Gaza doesn't want it. Hamas don't want a two-state solution.
Then get rid of Hamas without killing a million civilians.
And how do you do that?
I'd treat the pursuit of Hamas terrorists with the same regard for civilian life in Gaza that you would if they were hiding in Israel.
Okay, so you have 20,000 deaths according to Hamas, of which apparently 10,000 are actual Hamas terrorists.
I've answered your question, Rob.
And according to the British generals,
I've answered your question,
Israel is the most ethical
I've answered your question, Rob.
Armies and militaries.
I've answered your question, Rob.
You haven't, because you don't live in reality.
Oh, okay. And the reality is, well, so how many...
It's existential.
Okay, final question.
To a government.
Final question. How many dead Palestinians is too many in pursuit of this goal?
One. All dead is wrong. All dead is wrong.
Okay, so what's the number at which you say stop killing them?
You can't put a number on it.
I can.
You can't as a government.
Okay. You're not a government.
You can't as a government.
You're not a government.
So
how many is too many for you?
So at the moment you have 250,000 Israelis who can't live in their homes.
I've answered your question, Rob. I've answered your question. Why can't you answer mine?
Because as a government,
You're not a government.
It could be millions.
You're not a government. Okay.
It could be millions.
There we are. And that would be acceptable in pursuit of the defence of Israel.
Potentially, yes, as an existential threat.
I'm grateful for your honesty.
Yeah, the same
really
way
am.
1 million Afghans have been kicked out of Pakistan.
It's not the same. It's not the same way at all. But you keep clinging to these ludicrous. Okay.
We're not at millions.
How is kicking 1 million Afghans out of Pakistan the same as killing 1 million Palestinians?
Because fundamentally, there are deaths involved. People keep talking about ethnic cleansing.
No, Rob. How is kicking 1 million Afghans out of Pakistan the same as killing 1 million Palestinians? Because you just said it was.
It was a stupid comment of mine.
Well, finally, something we can agree on. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Millions being an acceptable number. And listen, I know it sounds a bit disingenuous and possibly even facetious, but I am grateful to people like Rob for saying it out loud, however hard they work to dress it up or to pretend that they're saying something different. And in a way, we should be grateful to Zippy Hotivelli for saying it out loud. But it's the people who hate what they hear, but hate even more the idea of having to disown it, to whom I hope we may have, or with whom I hope we may have made some progress today, although I wouldn't necessarily bet the house on it. Well, talk about a change of pace, or indeed a change of gear, a change of tone, a change of context. It's Thursday, it's 12 o'clock. It's the first Mystery Hour of 2024.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
3 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the shallow end now beckons. Having spent 2 hours in the deepest of deep ends, I think we can have a little bit of a flounder, can't we, in the shallow end? Your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on the radio dial. And, of course, the question of what qualifies for inclusion in Mystery Hour is one for the ages. I generally don't like questions about motoring, but apart from that, anything that's got you puzzled, anything that's got you mystified, anything that's got you beriddled, if that's a word, can qualify. You can even win. If you were unlucky enough not to receive one for Christmas, then you can get your hands on a Mystery Hour board game, best-selling board game, the Mystery Hour board game, by submitting my favourite contribution of the week, either a question or an answer. The full terms and conditions for that are at lbc.co.uk. I think that's everything. Is that everything? You want to find out more about the board game, you can go to mysteryhour.co.uk. You want to find out the terms and conditions of the competition under which you can win a board game, you need to go to lbc.co.uk. I think we'll just crack on. Ross is in Bowness in Scotland. Ross, question or answer?
It is a question, James.
Carry on.
My question was, how was measurements measured?
How were measurements measured? Well, all of them.
Yeah. Well, I suppose.
We'll be here all year.
I was thinking more about your time and weight. When, for example, a second was invented or worked out, time's a construct, so how did they just say, well, this is a second, this is exactly
Let's just do that then. Second? Let's just do that.
Yeah, because I suppose weights are a little bit easier, but yeah, time. A
second. When did a second become a second?
When did a second become a second? How did they agree upon that measurement? And then was it the same 500 years ago as today, with different computers and different ways of measuring things?
I mean, it's a bit of a crazy question, isn't it?
Well, my mind wanders at work a lot, so.
Well, not in the last 2 hours. That's too risky. I got to be like, that's why I'm so exhausted. But generally, my mind sometimes wanders. So you start with a day, wouldn't you? You'd start with the day, then it gets turned into 24 hours, and then it gets turned into an hour is 60 minutes, and a minute is 60 seconds. So somewhere, someone, somehow, made those decisions.
Yeah, but then obviously when it was down to the sun and shadows, I imagine, when they were originally measuring a day, how could they break it down into seconds and minutes when they didn't exist yet? and how to decide what that was.
When did a second become a second? When did a second... I mean, I just can't believe I've got no clue about that. I just thought there'd be some sort of... I can't just say something random like it was probably the Egyptians. I just don't know. That's a great question. That's why Mystery Hour is so magical, isn't it? Because even after all these years... Something like that. And someone will ring in now or text in and say, actually, I think you'll find this question was answered in 2007. It's contained within the Mystery Hour board game, which we played on Boxing Day. Yeah, but it doesn't matter, does it? I can't remember, therefore it never happened. If I can't remember it, it never happened. Eve is in Brussels, in Belgium. Eve, question or answer?
Hello, James.
Hello.
Hello. First of all, I have to say, this question is from my wife. My wife is too starstruck to talk to you. So
Don't be ridiculous. What's your wife's name? I put her on the list.
Anne-Marie.
Anne-Marie, okay. What is the question?
Okay. I was wondering why the head at the top of the neck of a violin or a cello or a double bass always has the shape of a spiral. Because if the shape has a function, I don't know what function.
Well, the strings wrap around it, don't they? No, they wrap around the peg, don't they? Yeah.
And I wonder if the shape has a function, but the fact that I've seen sometimes, very, very seldom, another shape like a lion's head.
Like a what?
A lion's head.
Oh, yes.
I've seen that once.
Okay.
At a concert, but it's very, very, very seldom. For centuries, apparently, all the heads at the top of the neck of violins and cellos always have that.
Whereas they sort of they curl in on themselves, like a sort of...
Exactly.
Like a flat
and
spiral. A coil, like a coil.
Exactly.
Well, it looks nice. It could just be aesthetic, couldn't it? It could just be aesthetic.
Yes, but, I mean, there are many other shapes that look nice.
You could have it you could have it sharpened, and then you could have it as a weapon in case there was a stage invasion or something like that. When Stravinsky was doing the Rites of Spring, if he'd had armed violinists, everything could have turned out slightly differently. I love that. Will you thank Anne-Marie for me, please, Eve? That's a wonderful question.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I hope we get an answer. Why do stringed instruments have that coil effect, the spirally bit on the end of the neck, it doesn't serve any function as far as we can tell, but maybe it does. 12:09 is the time. And where do seconds come from? When did we get seconds? Steve is in Bromsgrove. Steve, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
I drove through Bromsgrove last week, Steve.
Did you? Whereabouts?
I was on my way to Brockencote Hall in Chaddesley Corbett.
Very nice.
It is very nice, actually. Correct pint in the dog. Lovely part of the world. What's the question?
I would like to know where the king goes to the toilet. So if you just bear with me.
All right.
So say he's got an engagement in Brighton and he's driving back to London and suddenly needs to go. Does he stop off at the Peace Pottage service station or do they have somewhere planned in between?
Is it like bus drivers? Do they have a special key for some private facilities? So when he's out and about is what we're talking about.
Is there stately homes that they stop off at? If they're on their way, do they plan or do they go... Well, we'll just, Did
he pop into Heston on his way to Windsor? Toby Carvery. Pull up at a pub and pretend you're going to buy a drink, or do that thing where you look as if you're walking back to your table when in fact you're just trying to find the gent. Has he got? I mean, he's not got people to do it for him, has he? That's one thing you can't delegate.
But it could be a long drive back from...
Well, it would be a long drive. I mean, you'd go before you set out, but that's no guarantee, is it?
No, those prawn sandwiches might repeat.
That's a wonderful question. I don't know if I'm allowed to tell you this, Steve, so keep it between us, will you? But there is a toilet at the Royal Albert Hall that is reserved for the monarch.
How do you know that?
I can't tell you that. I'd have to kill you.
Okay. Have you used it?
I certainly can't tell you that. I would really have to kill you. But it is so that the monarch doesn't have to, queue up with everybody, which was more of an issue, I think, for the last monarch than for the current one, because, the queuing element would be more noticeable, probably. But so where does he go to the loo? Where does he go to the loo on a long journey? That's a great question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And it has to be en route. This is the point, because you can't say, well, we keep one. When she came to open our school, we closed the staff toilets. And where does the king go for a wee when he's got like a 200-mile journey to make by car? Alex is in Greenwich. Alex, question or answer?
Hi, James. Happy New Year. It's
Happy New Year
a question, please, mate.
Oh, now carry on.
It's just a very quick one. Basically, I was playing a game. I don't think I'm allowed to mention it. It involves flying helicopters at time.
Why aren't you allowed to mention it? Did someone tell you that when you rang in?
No, I just kind of imagined.
Why?
I don't know. So basically, it's Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, why would you not be allowed to mention that?
I have no idea. I was just a bit nervous.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. No, I like it because sometimes people worry that because on the BBC you're not supposed to like mention things and there's product placement rules and stuff like that. But no, you don't worry about it. Seriously. Anyway, even if you're not allowed to do it, it's me that gets into trouble, not you. So just chill. Go on.
Yes. So basically, what the question was, I was wondering what dictates how many blades go on a helicopter propeller, I guess. Because I've seen some with 2. I've seen some with 4, which...
2? You've seen a helicopter with 2 blades?
Yeah.
What, with people in it, not just a little toy one? Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. I've seen some with 7 or 8. So I was wondering what dictates...
Well, then nothing dictates it then, does it?
No, see, because I've seen it on different...
You can't have one, that'd be stupid. Although, in a way, if you've got 2, then you could argue that you've only got 1, but you mean blades coming out from the central point. You don't mean like one blade cut in half, as it were. So.
No, of course.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Well, I shall find out for you. I mean,
so
if you've got one with 2 and one with 8, it's hard not to avoid the conclusion that it doesn't matter. But you want to know what makes how do they decide? What determines how many blades there are on a thingamy?
Yeah.
No, I like it. How are you getting on Grand Theft Auto? What is going on in the world of Grand Theft Auto, Alex? I've been out of the loop now for a while, but the girls have grown up, so I'm going to be able to buy the next one if it ever comes out. There's
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think we're all just anxiously waiting for the new one to come out, which obviously isn't going to be until next year now.
No, I know. They got our appetite whetted, and then it turned out it was still miles away. Thank you. 13 minutes after 12 is the time. It's called a scroll. Captain Birdseye tells me. I slightly edited his Twitter handle there. It's called a scroll, that thing on the violin. The scroll at the end of the neck. What's it for? When were seconds invented? Where does the king go to the loo if he's on a long car journey? And how do they know how many blades to put on a helicopter, or what determines how many blades are put on a helicopter? I'm going to read this because I read out some unpleasant tweets and text, didn't I, in the first couple of hours of the programme. So I'm going to read this from Jill on the Isle of Man. It flies in the opposite direction. Hi, James. Happy New Year. Thank you, Jill. I just want to say I'm about to re-listen to the last 2 hours on Catch Up. Such was the quality of the exchanges this morning. And you, my friend, in the many years I've been listening to you, have honed your professional skills to bring us to the point of enabling such honesty in conversation. Well done, as that is so sorely needed right now. And I will allow myself a little glow of gratitude for that text, Jill, by way of balance for some of the less pleasant ones that I read out earlier in the day. It's 12:15.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973.
It is 17 minutes after 12. It's called a Bell Huey, is it? There are definitely helicopters that only have 2 blades. So what dictates the number of blades that a helicopter has? Where does the king go for a wee on a very long road journey? What is the scroll, the spirally, coily bit at the end of the neck of a stringed instrument for? Does it serve a purpose? And when were seconds invented? If indeed that is the right word to use in the context of seconds. Were they invented or were they always there? They just got named. Whoa, that's philosophy, that is. That is your philosophy, that is. Were seconds always there? Were they invented or were they just named? Did an orange exist before it was an orange? What came first, the colour or the fruit? That's why Mystery Hour remains so engaging. Sam's in queue. Sam, question or answer?
Oh, hi, James. I have a question.
Carry on, Sam.
Basically, over the Christmas period, I was unfortunate enough to go down with the flu. I hadn't been ill for at least 5 years. I can't even remember the last time I've been ill, but I was hit bad. I was coughing, spluttering, all of the above, all the shivers, all the pain, and I was kind of curious. There's a sort of, I don't know whether it's an urban myth, man flu. Do men suffer from flu more severely than women? I mean, I don't imagine the the frailer of the species would have survived what I went through. It was bad.
Oh, pathetic. It's ridiculous. So what's the question? Is man flu a real thing?
Is it a real thing? I mean, how could you quantify, do men suffer more than women from flu?
No, but that's not what man flu means.
No?
No, it's the opposite. Man flu is a cold that we think we're really suffering on an untold scale, but a woman with exactly the same virus would just get on with it.
Well, wait, is it an urban myth, though? I mean,
no, because you've just proved it. You just said that you don't think a woman could cope with the terrible pain that you were suffering. She wouldn't have even been in bed, mate.
Well, I did. There are a lot of sketches that sort of mock this, but I did read somewhere or hear somewhere that I mean, this is why with measles we suffer more as adults, because we're bigger and then there's more of the virus in us. So maybe as men, because we're generally bigger than women, we have more virus within us and we suffer more. That was my scientific thought on it, as opposed to the...
No. Women generally have a higher pain threshold for hot water. That's come up on Mystery Hour before. I don't know if you've ever got into the shower when the temperature setting has been put in place by a woman, but I don't know. So is man flu real? But but it's not a thing. It's not it's a. God, I nearly swore then. It's a Mickey take. Man flu. It's got, I've got flu. No, you haven't. You've got man flu. Man flu is a cold. Man flu is what you call a cold. If you're a man.
Can we put it to the board, though?
Well, I don't know that we can put it to the board. No, because no one has ever claimed that man flu is an actual virus specific to men.
Well, I'm not claiming that.
Well, maybe they are. Maybe there is.
I'm wondering whether we do genuinely have
I've done that thing again.
To say that we suffer more than women.
Yeah, I think, do you know, I apologise. I think I've done that thing again. I've got on my high horse, and then as I've looked down from my high horse, I've thought you shouldn't have got up on this high horse. The caller might have a point. Sam could be onto something here. So is there such a thing as man flu?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. You sure you didn't have COVID?
Excuse me.
You still got it.
Yeah, no, I'm more or less better, but I'm not entirely sure. I've been out in.
So you didn't do a test?
I went on holiday by mistake, and I've been out in the.
Who do you think you are, Withnail?
Yeah, he's one of my heroes. But I'm in Purbeck at the moment. I've been in a sort of little cottage in the middle of nowhere, and I haven't really had access to.
Okay, so you could have COVID, but you didn't. You haven't been able to do a test. You know, I'll tell you something funny, Sam. When you coughed, then my actual gut reaction, I reached for the hand sanitizer in the studio. I just thought, where's the hand sanitizer? Then I suddenly thought, no, he's at the other end of the country. I don't need to sanitise my hands. That's
probably not that contagious.
That would be a story, wouldn't it? That would be it. That would be a virus. I'll tell you what. Thank you, Sam. Is man flu a thing? 0345 6060 22 minutes after 12. Rebecca is in Greenwich. Rebecca, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on.
So the scrolls on a stringed instrument, the scroll at the end, serves no function.
Oh.
It's purely decorative, and it was often sort of used as a marker of the maker's skill set, if you like.
Okay, right.
So to kind of display how fancy they were or how good they were at making violin, viola, cello, whatever it was. So yeah, there you go. No function at all.
I suppose it just becomes a thing over the years, and they all have to do it. Are you sure? Qualifications?
So my mum was in the LSO, London Symphony Orchestra. She played the viola for 30 plus years.
And she told you?
I learned. Well, yeah, I learned the violin from when I was sort of, God knows, 4.5
Because are you sure it doesn't have a resonance sort of purpose?
No,
because if it was just a flat edge. No, that's all in the inside of the instrument. That's why it has the cutout sections on either side. But it was one of the first things I said to my mum was, why is this like a snail? And Mum said, it's to show off. Maybe she said it to me because I was a kid and it was cute. But as far as I know, it doesn't serve any purpose in terms of sound or timbre or anything like that. No? Fair enough. I mean, it's a round. I mean, someone might do a challenge on this one, but it's a round of applause for you.
I'll welcome it. Oh, thanks.
At this stage.
I'll welcome a challenge. Happily, that's fine. I could well be wrong.
There it is. Don't we all? Thank you, Rebecca. Let me just write your name down next to Ross's. No, it was Eve. It was Anne Marie actually who asked that question via Eve, and it was Rebecca that answered it. Sam's in Cardiff. Sam, question or answer?
question, James.
Yes.
I don't remember very much from school. However, I do remember that I was told that as a human, your eyes can see your nose, but your brain cancels it out.
Okay.
Does the same apply to all animals?
Well, how on
like
earth would
dogs?
we ever know? How could we know unless they can talk?
Well, this is why I'm asking.
So what's got quite a big nose?
Well, you've got like a dog, which has got from a pug a very small nose to something like a German Shepherd with a long nose.
What about a penguin with a beak? A penguin or a heron or something like that?
Or horses that have got an exceptionally long nose.
Well, long face.
But their eyes are yes, but their
how
eyes
much
are at
of
the
their
side
face
of
is
their
a
head.
nose? Who knows? Who knows how much of their face is a nose?
But can they see it, or does their brain cancel it out in the same way?
Okay. So you can see your nose if you try to, can't you? You do this thing where you look down and you can sort of, certainly if you close one eye, it's a lot easier. But there is some sort of what I would call cerebral editing going on there. The brain is just removing it from your vision. Otherwise, it would be weird, wouldn't it? It'd be there all the time. It'd be like a little, like a rifle sight on a video game or something. That everywhere you looked, it was in shot. But does that work for other creatures? I just can't, for the life of me, conceive of how we'd know. But I will put it on the board. I mean, some must know, mustn't they? Because they use it. So, like a heron must have a fairly clear idea of how big its beak is. Otherwise, it'd never catch a fish, would it?
Well, no, but then, like, when you're driving a car, you can't always see the end of the bonnet, but you know where it is.
That's a very good point that you make, actually, yes. Although you don't use your car to catch fish.
Well, hopefully not.
I shall put it on the board. God knows what the answer will sound like, if indeed we get one. But I, for one, look forward to it. Thank you, Sam. Pete's in Manchester. Pete, question or answer?
Hey, James. Happy New Year.
Thank you, mate.
I was sat in the car park having some lunch before Christmas. I was looking up, and on the top of a lamppost, it was a bit of a windy day, there was a seagull. It was a common gull, and it only had one leg, and I was feeling really sorry for it. I was thinking it was having trouble staying up. It was wobbling a little bit. You know, it wasn't falling, but I was thinking, oh, poor seagull, why has it lost its leg?
Oh.
Then it flew off, landed on the car park itself, and ate a burger, and it had two legs. So my question is, why do birds perch on one leg?
Well, what are they doing with the other one?
Well, they're tucking it into their tummy.
Well, I think that's the answer then.
Why is that the answer?
Well, imagine if you only had one glove.
Yeah.
And it was really cold out and you had no pockets. What would you do?
Yeah. Well, you're saying it's to keep warm?
Yeah. They're warming up one leg, and once it's ever a bit toasty, off they hop onto the other leg.
Do birds' legs get cold? I mean, there's not much meat on them, is there?
Legs, doopy-doopy-doo.
I mean, it was struggling to stay up.
Was it?
You know,
was it very windy?
It wasn't that windy, no.
So why do birds stand? Why do birds stand on one leg?
Say that again.
Why do birds stand on one leg?
Yeah. Why do they stand on one leg? I mean, flamingos do it, don't they, as well? And then they don't live in cold climates, do they?
No.
So
you're on.
Okay, thank you.
I like it. Why do birds stand on? I'm just trying to think of it. Sometimes I pause a bit, Pete, in the hope that an answer presents itself to me while I'm pausing, but not on this occasion. The flamencos made me think I knew the answer.
Yeah. Does that scupper that, does it?
Yeah. Well, it is cold, though. If it gets cold in the water...
What, in Florida?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's still... I mean, it's not hot, is it? It's still
not that cold, is it?
Well,
really?
You'd notice it if you had... if you go in the sea...
I've swum in the sea.
Yeah, and it's colder than it is out. It's colder in than out.
It's not that cold.
No, but it's colder in than out. It's colder in than out.
Oh, okay.
Can't we?
I know what you're doing.
I think it's heat. I think it's something to do with heat. But
maybe.
Yeah, we'll find out, won't we?
Okay. Right.
All right.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Bye.
Right. What was the sandwich?
It was a chicken nuggets.
It wasn't even a sandwich.
I was trying to sound posh. It wasn't a sandwich. It was chicken nuggets.
Chicken nuggets. Oh, you were having a filthy lunch, Pete.
Caught me out.
You were having a filthy lunch. Love it. Fantastic. Have a great day. 28 minutes after 12 is the time. David's in Birmingham. David, question or answer?
It's an answer, James, and I'm quite hungry now after that.
Yeah, you and me both. I'm still looking for my hand sanitizer after Sam started coughing in the Lake District. What have you got for me? Go on.
Okay, it's an answer to the helicopter question.
Yes.
And first off, have you ever seen MASH?
Yeah, not for a while, though.
Then you've seen a helicopter with two blades.
Oh, of course you have. Yes, you're right.
Just to take you back on that. But the reason that helicopters have different numbers of blades is really, I mean, there's plenty of factors, but the main one is to do with the amount of lift that's required. In the industry, helicopters are also known as rotary wing aircraft. And the rotor is essentially a wing. You need a combination. Well, basically, the lift is generated by the area and the power. So if you had an enormous, so if you had a big old helicopter like a Chinook or a Sea King or something like that,
yes,
if you only had two blades, they'd need to be ridiculously long. So what they do is they add other rotors so that you can have a smaller disc area.
Yeah.
While still continuing to have the amount of power.
So, I mean, it's pretty straightforward then. You create more lift, the more rotors you have, the more lift you create, so the heavier the helicopter, the more you need.
And of course, you don't. It's a fine balance because whenever you create lift, you also create drag and weight. So it's a trade-off between the two. But if you've got a really big helicopter, you just need to put more blades on it.
That's fantastic. Qualifications?
I did 1 year of an aeronautical engineering degree, and I work for a company that makes the actuation systems that cause the rotors to move because they actually change the angle of incidence. So as they're coming towards the front of the helicopter, they have a positive angle of incidence. So if you think about putting your hand outside when you're on a motorway or on maybe not a motorway, but a fast road, and have it angled up, that's a positive angle of incidence. And if you have it the other way, it's negative. So you get lift on the way.
Of course you do. Yeah, crikey. Yeah. Why did you only do 1 year?
Sorry?
Why did you only do one?
I did more applied drinking than aerospace engineering.
So you dropped out?
Yeah.
But you still got a job in the sector?
Oh yeah.
Does your boss know that you didn't finish your degree then?
Yeah.
That's a relief.
I actually did a degree in economics and then did a Master of Science in something else as well. So I'm going for the full set. I've only got the economics. I just need the maths, physics, and bionics, and I too can be Kevin.
That's a big round of applause. That's a lovely answer. Thank you. No, thank you. It's kind of obvious when. You think about it, but to have it explained so expertly was an absolute pleasure. Time now for the very latest news headlines with Amelia Cox.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
12:35 is the time, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. The chicken nuggets have ever caused quite as much hilarity as they did when Pete mentioned them a moment ago. When were seconds invented? What does the king do when he needs a wee on a long car journey? Is man flu a thing? Is there any sort of scientific basis behind the story, the phenomenon of man flu? Can animals see their noses? And why do birds stand on one leg? Richard is in, it says here Ashford de la Zouch, but surely it's Ashby de la Zouch.
Yeah, it's Ashby de la Zouch, yeah.
Yes, I thought so. That's where Rick Astley comes from, isn't it?
No, never.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Where does Rick Astley come from then?
I thought he was from Hull.
I've got it in my head that he was from Ashby de la Zouch. It's just one of my little filed away pieces of helpful trivia.
The only person ever from Ashby de la Zouch was the old chap on the cover of the that Mastermind game where you used to put the pegs into the hole.
Was he from Ashby de la Zouch?
He was from Ashby de la Zouch.
What was he, a sort of model?
I think so, yeah, I think so.
Newton Le Willows.
And
Rick Astley's from Newton Le Willows. I've got it mixed up in my head because of all the French.
There you go.
That'll be it. That's a pretty lame claim to fame, isn't it, for Ashby de la Zouch?
It's not great, is it? Adrian Mole lived here for a while, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He did, before he moved back home into the pigsty with his mum and dad, the converted pigsty. Well, we're covering a lot of ground here, Richard. What's your question?
Question. If you've got two different factors of sun cream, so say you've got a 20 and a 50, and you put them both on, are they diluting each other or adding to each other? So do you end up with a factor 70 or a factor 35?
They must be diluting each other.
I don't know. I mean, we've talked about this often on beaches.
They must be.
Yeah, I don't know.
No,
I
there
know
must
why I'm
be.
asking. I really don't know.
No, but
maybe if you put half of the amount in, they dilute each other.
It's a thickness issue, isn't it? It's so the 50 is thicker than the 20, right? Usually.
No.
Yeah, it is.
You can get spray on 50s.
Yeah, well then you can't measure the thickness properly. Viscosity. Thank you. But
yeah, you're welcome.
So you put 20 in a 50, you're diluting the 50 and strengthening the 20, and it's going to meet halfway at approximately the 35 mark.
Yeah, I'm not so sure.
No? Well, I can't. I'm not going to give myself a round of applause, but I'll be amazed.
No.
I'll be amazed if you end up with 70.
Well, 50 plus 20, 70.
Do you want some breaking news?
Okay, go on.
Rishi Sunak's just said that it is working assumption that he will hold a general election in the second half of this year, Richard.
Oh, good. We've got that to look forward to then. Excellent.
What are you having for lunch?
Me? I'm making a courgette soup as we speak.
Do you use a stock? Do you make your own stock for that? Or
it's an OXO cube.
Is it? Interesting.
Yes.
Well, good luck with it.
No.
I like the SPF
no
question.
Chicken nuggets around here.
No. Quite right too. You're not in Ashby de la Zouche. It's posh.
Quite right.
12:38 is the time. If you end up, you put some 20 in with your 50 and you end up with 70, I shall give you the money myself. Ed's in Leighton. Ed, question or answer?
Hey, James. Yeah, I've got a question, please. Actually, konnichiwa and Happy New Year from Japan. I'm on holiday at the moment with the family.
Oh, congratulations. You don't say that to people on holiday. Thank you, will do. And the same to you as well.
Cheers. Yeah, my little one has a question for you. She was in the kitchen brushing her teeth and she noticed...
Why is she brushing her teeth in the kitchen?
Well, sometimes you do.
Go for a wonder.
Or do you not?
break the boredom. Go on.
Yeah. But she was, there's a sink in the kitchen. It's useful.
Yeah?
So she was looking at brushing her teeth with the electric toothbrush and looked at the microwave, and the numbers started kind of bouncing outside of the frame of the microwave.
Yeah.
Nothing else was vibrating or jiggling around, but the numbers were. And she asked me what that was about, and I said, I don't really know, but I have experienced the same myself in a hotel. I was looking at the TV and there was an LCD clock on it, and I was wandering around as you do with a toothbrush.
Yeah.
And the numbers started jiggling around outside of the frame of the clock. So I wanted to know how that's happening, or what it's doing, or is there a reason your brain is perceiving it that way?
So it's just the lights, the LED lights that are jiggling around, and they're jiggling around because you're jiggling your head around with your toothbrush. But you're confused as to why nothing else appears to be jiggling around at the same time.
Yeah.
This is quite a complicated question.
Maybe, but would have thought someone would know
I haven't got
on.
a toothbrush with me. Shall I use a pen? I don't use a pen because I might leave it here and then Sheila Fogarty will pick it up and she'll...
Try when you get home.
I'm going to imagine I'm brushing... I can't imagine you're brushing your teeth because you've got to actually agitate your mouth a bit, haven't you?
Yeah, I think...
Well, I'll just shake my head a bit like this. I'm just shaking my head. This is going to look great on YouTube later. I'm just shaking my head a bit. What can I look... And I'm looking at there's a screen up, but it's got white letters, not red. What can I look at?
Maybe you need an LCD clock.
What can I look at? I've got an LCD. I've got an LCD clock over. Is that LCD? Okay. That one there? That's it. I've got an LCD clock. It's got loads on it, but nothing's really. I don't.
Faster, James. Faster.
I'm going faster. I can't go any faster. I'll do myself an injury. No, I'm not getting it. So the numbers would move out of the little square that they're in, and everything else would stay where...
Maybe it's related to the electric toothbrush.
Were you both using electric toothbrushes?
Yeah, both of us.
Oh, well, I'm never going to be able to emulate that, am I? You should have told me that before I started jiggling.
What's happening in the electric toothbrush to make that happen, or is it just the speed?
Well, it must be the speed of the oscillations, isn't it?
Yeah, why is that your brain that's not...
Only the lights are jiggling and nothing else, apparently.
Yeah.
All right, well, if we get an answer to this, I'll be absolutely staggered.
Well, I'd be thrilled, because, I'd like to know.
Well, I would too now, so would your little girl. Actually, she's probably less interested than you are. She's probably forgotten by now, hasn't she?
The little one, no, she loves it.
Oh, good.
She wanted to ask the question.
Fantastic.
It's me that wanted to ask the question.
You're on.
Right. Sweet.
Enjoy the rest of your holiday.
Will do. We're flying back tomorrow. We'll be back in the country. See you soon.
Sayonara.
All right, cheers.
12:41. Simon's in Littlehampton. Simon, question or answer?
Oh, hi, James. It's a question.
Yes.
And obviously, like everyone's been watching the darts for the last week or so. And it occurred to me in the semi-final that the board either side has got two markers doing the scores on paper, whereas the TV coverage and even there was a long shot of the stage. Even the stage itself has electronic digital readouts of the scores.
Yeah.
So what's the history even, or why do they still do a paper version? Two people employed to write the numbers down either side of the scoreboard.
In case there's a power cut.
Yeah, but if you're at the back of the stadium on a power cut,
yeah,
you're not going to then. Someone at the back's not going to read the notes on the board.
No, their power cut. They stop playing, and that means they know what the score is when they start again because they've got it down on paper.
Have you not heard of a backup generator?
No, I haven't heard of a backup generator. Have we got a backup? Have we got a backup generator?
I would imagine you have.
Yeah, apparently quite a big deal. If we didn't have a backup generator, we'd be in all sorts of trouble.
On a major event like that, I'm sure they've got a couple of batteries.
So where is the paper one? Where is it exactly?
There's two guys. So as you look at the dartboard itself, you've got the guy with the microphone.
It was Ross. I forget his name, but Ray. It was his last one last night, wasn't it?
It was indeed. Yeah, it was quite an emotional.
Good luck, Ray.
And
Good luck, mate. Good luck with that.
When you shook hands.
Yeah.
So to the right of him and to the left of the other board, there are two guys with felt tip pens and a giant A3 or A2 whiteboard.
Just doing it manually.
Doing it manually, and it only occurred to me watching the semi-final why.
Maybe they do the sums. Maybe they do the sums. They still do the sums.
How would they relay that to the person that's then keying in the scoreboard? Because that's got to be instant. Those players were so fast.
They really were, weren't they?
They were literally.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. Why do they still do the scores on paper when you know the technology is not only present but better, but quicker?
Yeah, and if Luke Littler phones in. There you go.
That's a Ray Liotta all day long, isn't it? Or maybe just Humphreys, though. I don't know. No, we'll accept the defeated finalist. Well, in fact, we'll probably accept any professional darts player as a Ray Liotta, but within reason. Within reason. Thank you, mate. I like that one. We'll try and get you an answer. Why do they still do the scores with pen and paper at the darts? Why does the display on a microwave or an LCD clock jiggle when you're brushing your teeth, but nothing else does? If you mix different SPF suntan creams, lotions, do they add to each other or dilute each other? Why do birds stand on one leg? Can any other animals see their noses? Is there such a thing as man flu? Where does the king do his ablutions on a long car journey? And when were seconds invented? We need some answers. Can we get rid of some of these questions? I need these phone lines for. We need some answers. It's 12:45. We've only answered 2 questions. I can't do everything. Get me some answers.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973.
It is 12:48. I love Listen Back. What do we call it? Listen Back? Is it called Listen Back? You know, and Rewind Live Radio and all that stuff. Because Global Player and all that. Because some people forget that they're listening. They're not listening live, you know. So I get these messages, and I think, what are you on about? Sometimes I get messages that were intended for Nick, for Ari. In the first sort of 10 minutes of the show, I really do a double take on that. I said, what do you can't call me that. Unbelievable. But then sometimes I'll get some about my own show, but they're like an hour or 2 out of date. I like this one here from, well, it doesn't say who it's from. It's not. Thank you for calling him the disgraced former Prime Minister, James. Please keep calling son of John that. Everyone should call him that, the disgraced former Prime Minister. It's bizarre how that these kind of things get sanitised. Anyway, answers. Shane is in Leeds. Shane, question or answer?
Answer, James.
That's a relief.
Oh, Happy New Year, by the way.
Well, the same to you, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Right, it's an answer, or an attempt at an answer, to the seconds question. The modern second didn't become important until the invention of mechanical clocks in the 16th century, I think.
Is that right?
Yes. I mean, you never see a sundial with seconds on it.
This is true.
And the division by 60, it's obviously a division of a minute, which is in turn a division of an hour, and that comes from the ancient Babylonian counting system, which is a base 12 counting system,
yes.
which which...
So because that's how they counted, that's how they divided the day. A bit chicken and egg, but probably the counting system came before the divisions of the day.
Yes, it did. So once the mechanical clocks started coming into existence, the first clocks that had seconds on it were in the early 16th century.
Okay.
I think it was Huygens who invented.
So they were invented by the Babylonians, essentially, and they were popularized by the horologists.
No, they were. The modern second was invented by Europeans. The second was defined differently in pre-modern times.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yes, but pre-modern people didn't.
They didn't need them. They didn't have them, so they didn't invent. I mean, it's one of those philosophical conundra. Is it an invention? Was it invented, or was it merely identified and named? You don't invent planets; you discover them. Well, they're now defined according to an atomic clock, but obviously back then, two different clocks would disagree on the length of the slightly different. So the shortest possible answer to the question, when were seconds invented or who were they invented by, you would say?
The makers of the early mechanical clocks.
Fair enough. Question answer. Qualifications?
Amateur historian, but I happened to read this when I was looking up an answer to a question on QI.
Oh, there you go. There it is. I've lost the question. Yeah. Who asked the question in seconds? Ross, wasn't it? God, it was the first question of the day. Thank you, Shane. Great work. Have a round of applause.
Brilliant.
There we go. Rizzo is in Orpington. Rizzo, question or answer?
Answer, please.
Carry on.
It's the toothbrush and the little girl in the microwave.
Sounds like the beginning of a very strange joke, doesn't it? Go on.
Little girl works in Turkey. Anyway,
walks into a microwave.
So,
you're gone.
Yeah, the reason why the light looks like it's bouncing all over the place is because LCDs and LEDs, they don't stay on like an incandescent bulb, which is constantly on. They flicker. They flicker very fast, 50 times a second, which is 50 hertz, which is our electricity in this country.
Yeah.
So it pulses 50 times a second, and when you use a toothbrush, your head is vibrating, as is your skull and your brain and your eyes. So the light, you're only catching like a very brief glimpse of that flash, so it looks like it's bouncing all over the place. But what's actually happening is your brain is trying to process that pulse of light at any one moment.
So with your eyes jiggling around because of the electric toothbrush, that is going to cause what you described.
Exactly. So if you use a manual brush, you won't notice it. Yeah. You can repeat the same process if you put your phone looking at an LED TV or car headlights. That's an LED. You'll see it on the camera flickering away because it's also pulsating.
Qualifications?
I am a colour scientist.
Oh, there it is. Round of applause for Rizzo. What a cool job. If I wasn't short of time, I'd ask you some interesting questions, but I am, so I can't. Patrick's in Hertford. Patrick, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's an answer to your question about a monarch going from A to B and then go to the toilet.
Yes, carry on.
So the route is always pre-planned, several months in advance. The venue will be scoped by a forward intelligence team.
Yes.
So they'll know every area they could go to, like a police station,
so there'll be designated P posts on the way to and from.
Indeed, yes. And the long distances will be travelled by aircraft.
Yeah.
This is the top of the food chain, of course.
Of course.
Not for the lower people.
And what, apart from police stations, what else? Because they're not going to go to the sort of Heston services, are they?
If needs must do, they will send the forward intelligence teams because they're very staffed well. They'll go there and say it's good to go. They will go in there, special escort motorbikes will guide them in.
Go, P.
Exactly. It's all fast lane stuff. And they don't travel at the same speed as us. They'll be in the outside lane, not stuck in the middle lane.
Zipping along. I've never seen that on the motorway. I've only ever seen that on the A4.
Well, it does happen, unfortunately. They do go
I know. You hear them blowing their whistles around Westminster, don't you? Qualifications, I think I know.
I'm retired from the police service.
Yeah, well, you have to add the second bit, Patrick. That's the good. Were you in there? Were you on this beat? Were you on this?
I can't say because National Protection or Security of the Council, government, etc.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, so we'll never know, will we? Have a round of applause.
Goodbye.
Thank you, mate. There it is. My friend Nick's been in touch to provide that answer and qualifications where it had indeed come up before a mystery hour. But as I said at the outset, if I can't remember it, it never happened. The Boris Johnson approach to presenting radio programmes. Toby's in Salzburg. Toby, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's an answer.
Carry on.
I cannot believe that I'm answering the second question about sunscreen on this program. And my qualification is visiting an animal sanctuary where there was a pig that had live testing of sunscreen.
That's right, yes.
So the answer is there are different types of sunscreen. There's the milky one.
Mm.
So the milky sunscreen, the sun blocker in it is zinc.
Right.
So if you mix two tubs, like a factor 20 and a factor 10, you would end up with the median, which is
factor
15.
Yes.
However, there are sun oils, tanning oils.
There are, yes.
And there, the viscosity you mentioned becomes an issue.
Ah.
And different viscosities don't mix.
What happens?
So it becomes an emulsion.
Right.
So you actually would have a bit of 20 and a bit of 10 next to each other. If it would be an even distribution, you would end up speckled.
You would like a Dalmatian? Or
Yeah,
tiny
well,
with
kinda
much
like
smaller
that,
spots? Like a
it
cake.
Depends on how hard you shake the emulsion. Yeah. So, but it cannot mix, so it cannot dilute the factor down.
Absolutely sensational answer, Toby. And it's the same qualification as last time you answered a question about something.
It is pigs with live testing. James, can I just say one thing?
Of course.
My in-laws visited for Christmas, and I got the board game.
Oh, happy days! Have you played it yet?
Yeah, fantastic. But can I suggest that you bring out a festive edition, because you unwrap the thing and then it's you staring at me.
And
on Christmas Day.
I think we might be redesigning the packaging without my face.
Please do.
Yes. That's a little unkind, Toby, but I should give you a round of applause anyway. That's incredible. Who'd have thought when he visited that animal sanctuary and encountered the pig that they used to test sun creams, it would prove so fruitful. David's in Nottingham. David, question or answer?
It's an answer, hopefully.
Carry on.
I'm not sure about this, but...
What?
I'm not 100% sure,
okay.
but I do remember seeing or reading it somewhere. It was on TV or somewhere.
Mm.
And it's about the bird. To conserve energy.
Yes.
The left half of the bird sleeps while the other stays awake. And so it can actually hold on.
So half the bird is asleep?
Apparently, yeah. But it may just be something I read which was false. But
it could be conserving heat energy, I'd have thought.
Yes, that's right.
Rather
energy
than
generally.
Yes, so it conserves energy.
It can then be vigilant.
Why does the bird stand on one leg? Answer: to conserve energy.
So on one side,
yes.
It sleeps on one side of the body.
And also the heat that would go out through the foot if it wasn't.
That's part of the energy, yeah.
Yes. I'm going to give qualifications. You think you might have read it once somewhere.
Well, I did read it somewhere.
Okay, and it might be true.
It might be.
Round of applause for David. Great work. Thank you, David. Squeezing one more, at least. Jamie's in Hammersmith. Jamie, question or answer?
Yeah, it's an answer.
Go on then.
It's about the man flu situation.
Oh, yes.
I'm not a medic, but I also read this in the Times. Hello? Are you there?
Yes, of course I'm here. I'm just listening to you.
I just heard something tinkle. That's why. I read an article in the Times that man flu is probably real because it's a hormonal thing. Men have more testosterone than women.
Well, some
and
of us
testosterone. Some, yeah. And testosterone tends to impede the functioning of the immune system.
So you suffer more. So the more manly you are, the more you suffer. I'm a slave. I'm a slave to flu. Qualifications, you read it in the Times. So man flu is a thing.
That's it.
That's a great answer. Well, round of applause for Jamie. Round of applause. Well done. Giving it to Pete. Chicken Nuggets Pete, as he will henceforth be known, gets this week's Mystery Hour board game. That will be winging its way to Manchester, I think Pete was in. Well done, mate. Just made everyone laugh so much, completely unintentionally. In fact, as Marcus in Chester says, thank you, James, I've had 4 laugh out loud moments during this week's Mystery Hour. If you missed any of it, you can listen back to the whole show podcast on Global Player. You can also pause and rewind live radio. All LBC's shows are there to catch up on, as well as the world's biggest podcasts. Pause and rewind live radio on Global Player, where you're always in control. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Swarbrick will be with you from 4. And Sheila Fogarty is with you now. 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 Fogarty